Hey friends, before we dive into tonight's story, did you know that nearly 80% of viewers aren't subscribed? If you're enjoying this content, hit that subscribe button. It really helps keep these long stories coming. Also, for even more police horror stories, check out my new channel. The link's in the description and pinned comment. I'd love it if you stop by and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. What time is it where you are and which city are you listening from tonight? Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into it. I remember the weight of the night pressing down on me before I even stepped out of the cruiser. The dashboard clock glowed 3:14 in harsh red digits, and the radio crackled with static before dispatch issued the call. Unit 12, 1057 in progress. Possible missing person on Ridgeway County Road 8. Caller is Mrs. Elena Price, reporting her daughter hasn't been heard from since 1800 hours yesterday. Name's Marissa. Last known location, abandoned logging camp off Forest Route 29. Conditions: heavy fog, temperature 42 degrees. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Ridgeway County was notorious for unforgiving terrain and sudden weather shifts. I thumbed the mic to confirm, voice low. Copy that, dispatch. En route to Forest Route 29. Then I eased the cruiser onto the narrow asphalt, headlights slicing through drifting fog like two hungry beasts. The road twisted through pines so tall they blotted out any moonlight, and every mile felt longer than the one before. My breath came steady, controlled. I'd been a deputy here for over 12 years. I knew that fog meant more than poor visibility. It swallowed sounds, confused senses, left you disoriented. And tonight I had a missing 15-year-old out there somewhere. By 3:32, I was at the logging camp's entrance. A rust-ed gate half buried in moss, a faded wooden sign that read, "Camp Alderwood, no trespassing." The sense of abandonment was palpable. I swept my flashlight across the broken remnants of a bunk cabin. Floorboards buckled, windows shattered, half a bunk mattress slumped in the corner like a corpse rising. I checked my radio again. Unit 12 to dispatch, I'm at the logging camp. Fork in the service road 200 yards ahead, veering east into thick forest. Beginning search on foot. Static answered. I popped open the trunk and grabbed my respirator mask. Ridgeway had pockets of industrial runoff from an old mill upstream, and my utility belt felt heavier than usual. Handcuffs, a flashlight, folding knife, extra mag for my service weapon, and the emergency survival kit. Everything felt cold against my skin. I clicked on the handheld radio and switched to Channel 2 for local ranger frequency. Deputy Cole here. I'm starting a perimeter at the logging camp. If anyone's near, let me know. Silence. I stepped off the road onto dirt, snapped on the respirator, and followed faint footprints imprinted in damp pine needles. They led toward the first cabin's charred remains. Someone had tried to burn it down, but the fire had sputtered out. Near the entrance, I found a smear of blood on broken metal rail, deep red, fresh enough that the warmth still lingered on my gloves when I pressed gently. I swore under my breath. I radioed dispatch. Unit 12. Possible blood trail at Cabin 1. Notify EMS to stage at the road. I'm going in further. I shouldered my rifle, the fog had me on edge, and moved deeper. Each step reverberated, crunching pine cones under my boots. The world narrowed to the beam in front of me and the shallow breaths escaping my mask. Then a faint sound, sniffing, like a terrified animal, echoing through trees. I froze. "Marissa?" I called softly, heart thudding. Only silence responded. I edged forward, every nerve alert. The sniffing came again, closer now, then raspy sobs. I followed the sound to a collapsed tree trunk. roots upturned like desperate hands grasping at earth. Beneath it, huddled in darkness, was her, hair matted with mud, eyes wide and rimmed red. She was trembling, breath shallow. "Deputy, please," she gasped. "There's something down here." I knelt beside her, reached to touch her shoulder. She recoiled, eyes darting. "No, don't. It knows your name." My pulse spiked. "What knows my name?" She choked out. "The man, the one who brought me here. I heard him whisper it in the fog." My training kicked in. "It's okay, Marissa. I'm here. I've got you." I braced her under my arm, pulling her upright. The mud and decay clung to her jacket. "Tell me what happened." She swallowed, lips trembling. "He offered me a ride when my tire blew, said he'd take me back to camp. I fell asleep, woke up here, under this log. He stood at the edge of the trees, just watching, called my name. He sounded like he knew me." My jaw tightened. Strangers offering rides to miners. Standard abduction scenario, but the isolating fog, the empty logging camp. It felt like a trap. I scanned the tree line with my light, nothing but shadows. I called for backup. Unit 12 to dispatch. Recovery successful. Subject in custody for transport. I need a perimeter check for one suspect. Male, mid-30s, dark build, last seen at tree line. As I half-carried Marissa toward the road, her fingers gripped my jacket. "Will he come back?" she whispered. I wanted to answer with certainty that I'd find him, arrest him, and she'd be safe. But Ridgway's woods could swallow a man whole, and fog could hide anything. I felt the engine's hum fade behind me as the woods swallowed my cruiser's taillights, leaving only the weak beam of my flashlight to guide me. The fog pressed in so tight it was like walking inside a cloud of static. Every breath tasted of damp pine and rot. I didn't know Marissa Price, but I knew enough about Ridgway County at 3:14 a.m. on a freezing February night to understand that every missing person call was a fight against time, terrain, and whatever darkness licked at the edges of that forest. I thumbed the mic on my handheld radio. "Unit 12 to dispatch. I'm on foot at the logging camp, beginning perimeter search." Static crackled back, then nothing. No backup yet. I checked my watch, 3:19. That meant I'd been tracking Marissa for nearly 5 minutes. 5 minutes wasted could mean the difference between hypothermia or danger, but I kept my pace measured. Each footstep crunched the pine needles and dry leaves, echoing back at me until I forced my mind to focus on the path of footprints in the mud. 2 sets, hers smaller, his larger. They wove between snapped saplings and over mossy stones, veering deeper into the gloom. At 3:24, I came to the first cabin's charred frame. The fire that had consumed it must have been fierce. Blackened beams leaned at odd angles, windows blown out, doors missing entirely. It smelled like burnt bark and desperation. I panned my flashlight across the hollowed-out interior, broken crates, an empty propane tank, scraps of blue fabric caught on a jagged nail. A rat scurried along the far wall, its red eyes reflecting my light before it vanished under debris. I shook my head. I needed to keep moving. The blood trail began 15 feet behind the cabin. Fresh, still bright against the dark mud, and sticky under my gloves when I pressed my fingertip to it. I winced, but pressed forward. My respirator hissed with each breath, but it kept the worst of the mill runoff off my lungs. My flashlight illuminated the droplets leading toward a stand of pines where the fog darkened to an impenetrable gray. I tightened my grip on the grip of my rifle. Standard procedure told me to call for EMS staging, but out here I had to trust my own boots and my own instincts. I keyed the mic again. Unit 12. Blood trail confirmed. Need EMS to road. Sender on site is Deputy Cole. Over. No answer. Calm silence. I sighed, stuffed the mic away, and kept going. My boots left shallow impressions beside Marissa's smaller steps. I followed those, expecting to see her crouched, terrified, but instead I rounded a clump of trees and found the second cabin, intact but abandoned. Rusted tin roof, sagging porch, door hanging from one hinge. Inside, the floorboards buckled under my weight. I swept the beam across a splintered table, where a half-empty water bottle had rolled into a corner like it had been tossed in panic. Next to it, a single false eyelash, thin and curved, laying on its edge as if it had just fallen off. I swallowed hard. She was here, terrified and alone. I called again. Cole to dispatch, possible victim inside second cabin. Stand by for evac. I heard my own echo. Cabin, victim, evac. My own words sounded clumsy. I blinked, forced them back into professional order, and stepped inside. The air was colder here, the fog seeping through every crack. My radio crackled with static again as I climbed the sagging steps to the porch, my knees complaining. I panned my light across the inside, a makeshift bed of pine boughs, scrawled words on the wall in charcoal. Please don't leave me here. Help me. And worse, a single phrase that bit into my gut. He knows your name. I crouched, brushing a finger across the mattress. It was damp, smelling of mildew and fear. The charcoal lines felt too fresh. I pivoted when I heard it, a soft, ragged breath coming from behind me. I swung the beam and found her crouched in a corner, knees drawn to her chest, trembling. Marissa, dirty, tear-streaked, frozen lips parted in a silent sob. Relief and adrenaline slammed into me. I crouched beside her, careful not to startle her more. Marissa? My voice was gentle but firm. It's okay, I'm here, I'm Deputy Cole. She flinched but didn't bolt. I reached out slowly. Her eyes, wide and unfocused, locked on mine. Deputy, she whispered, voice barely audible. He called out to me from the trees. He knew my name. My heart rate spiked. I glanced past her into the darkness visible through shattered windows, but saw nothing, only a wall of twisted branches and swirling fog. I offered her my radio. Talk to me, Marissa. Tell me what happened when he found you. She shook her head, eyes darting. He offered me a ride, she said. Said he was a logger. I thought he was safe. I fell asleep, woke up here under this log. She pointed to a broken root tangle near the cabin's foundation. Loose soil and damp wood that looked recently overturned. I flicked off my respirator and swiped at my brow. Who? I asked, voice low. She swallowed, traced trembling fingers through the air. The man. She drew a shaky breath. He was there, just at the edge, watching. He called my name when I woke. He laughed, like he knew me. I shivered, not from cold. You didn't see him? She shook her head. Only the fog and his voice. My training screamed at me to secure the scene. Find footprints, gather evidence, yet instinct told me we needed to move her now. Each second out here meant hypothermia, disorientation, or worse. You good to walk? I asked. She nodded weakly. I put my arm around her shoulders, steadying her. The chill seeped through my jacket, but adrenaline kept me warm as we navigated the porch steps. Outside, the fog had thickened, hugging the ground. No sign of her abductor, if he was even human. I half carried her toward the logging camp entrance, flashlight beam dancing ahead. Every crunch of twig underfoot sounded like gunfire. I tightened my arm around her, checked her pulse, steady but slow. We reached the service road where I'd staged my cruiser, its headlights off to preserve night vision. I ducked low behind her, then broke into a jog, crossing open ground before the tree line. I heard a snap behind me, a branch breaking under heavy weight. I looked back, heart hammering, but saw only fog. I kept moving. At the cruiser, I eased her into the passenger seat, then slid across to the driver's side. I grabbed my mic. Unit 12 to dispatch, subject secured, returning to station. Advise crime scene to hold perimeter at logging camp. Possible abductor in area, no visual. I hung up the mic, turned the key. The engine came alive, noise drumming against the fog. I glanced at her reflection in the side window. Pale cheeks, mascara streaked, eyes rimmed red. I opened my door and crouched beside her window. You're safe now. We'll get you warm, then we'll find out who did this. She nodded, but stayed silent. I closed the door, eased into the seat, and eased the cruiser into gear. As we drove back, the road unwound like a gray ribbon through shifting mist. Trees loomed on either side, branches reaching like fingers. Marissa pressed her face against the glass, breath fogging the window. She whispered, "He was so calm, Deputy. He said he knew me from the stories. He never stopped smiling." My blood ran cold. "Stories?" I asked. She looked at me, eyes haunted. "Mom told dispatch about my high school paper, the one I wrote on kidnapped teens. He said he found it interesting." The hairs on my arms stood straight up. A copy of her essay had been in her backpack at camp. A logical detail I had overlooked. That meant her abductor had rigged this, studied her, knew her deeply. I slammed the brakes. My door flew open, and I leapt out before the cruiser even stopped rolling backward. The engine cut as I hit the door. I grabbed my rifle, flicked off the safety. I radioed dispatch mid-breath. Unit 12. Possible suspect still out there. He's connected to her schoolwork. Notify all units. He's dangerous. Last known direction, east from camp. My voice was sharp, adrenaline laced. Then I looked down at Marissa's door, ajar, seat empty. My heart dropped. I spun, scanning the fog-blanketed trees. No footprints, nothing but drifting mist. The cruiser's headlights revealed a single set of prints leading back toward the logging camp. Her footprints, then larger ones edging ahead of them. I shouted into the fog, "Marissa!" My voice swallowed by the trees. I ran forward, flashlight in one hand, rifle in the other. The temperature seemed to drop further. My boots sank into the wet earth. Each inhale felt sharper, colder, as if I'd left the cruiser's engine heat behind and entered a freezer. Branches scraped my face, snagged my jacket. I called again, voice breaking with panic and rage. No response except a distant whisper, so soft I thought I imagined it. "Deputy Cole." I froze. My name on the wind, my mind spun. I shone my light into the fog, saw nothing but swirling white. Then, just beyond the beam, a shadow moved. The outline of a man, tall and straight-backed, standing between two pines, face hidden. He stepped forward, and the fog parted enough for me to see ragged clothes, a grin that reflected moonlight. Or was it flashlight glare? He raised a hand and pointed. His lips moved. "You're next." I fired once. The shot echoed like thunder, yet the figure remained. Then he turned and melted into the fog. I chased after the echo, heart pounding so loudly I thought I deafened myself. Branches whipped my arms, chills crawled up my spine, but I didn't stop until I burst back into the logging camp clearing. Empty, except for broken cabins and the echo of my own footsteps. The fog hovered low, and the charred cabin loomed like a tomb. I dropped to my knees in the mud, panting. My rifle clattered beside me. The only answer was silence, and the single digital camera I'd found in the cabin's root tangle, its green light blinking. I crawled into the charred ruins, hands trembling, and lifted the camera. The screen flickered. Static, then a shot of me sprinting down the service road, shouting her name, then darkness. I swallowed hard, clipped the camera to my belt, and stood, muscles weak. The temperature seemed to rise as adrenaline drained, leaving me colder than ever. I stepped out of the cabin, lifted my flashlight for one last sweep. No sign of Marissa, no sign of the man, only the fog, roiling like a living thing. I slung my rifle and radioed dispatch, voice hollow. Unit 12, subject still missing. Suspect at large. I'm initiating a full-scale search at first light. Notify county and state. My words echoed into the mist. Then I heard it again, clear and deliberate. Footsteps behind me in the mud. I spun, flashlight beam slicing through the haze. Nothing. I listened, heart beating in my ears. Branches overhead creaked as if bowed under a weight. The fog trembled. A low voice drifted around me, carrying on the wind. I know your name, Deputy Cole. I dropped to one knee, fist pressed to the cold earth. The gravel camp felt hollow, as if it had exhaled at my arrival, and was holding its breath now. I forced my radio back into my pocket. No backup coming in time. I had only the night, the fog, and a promise I couldn't keep, to find her before he found me. I stood slowly, muscles aching. My rifle felt too heavy, my flashlight flickered. The forest pressed in on all sides. Somewhere beyond, Marissa Price was alive. Or she was gone. And the man who called his victims by name was still out there, cataloging every turn I made, every fear I felt. I took a shaky breath and stepped back onto the path, boots sinking in the mud. Each step forward felt like a betrayal and a promise. I would find her, or I'd die trying. I didn't pause to consider whether I was chasing her, or him, into a death trap. The next steps blurred together, mud sucking at my boots, fog swallowing my flashlight beam, adrenaline pounding so hard I felt every rib crack. I kept moving down the old logging road, rifle angled low, eyes darting for any hint of movement. My radio was silent. No one could reach me out here. Not that it mattered. Whoever had taken Marissa wasn't playing by any rules. By 4:03, I reached the clearing where I'd first found her footprints leading back into the trees. The ground was churned up, hers and his, in and out, then diverging. I crouched down, tracing the indentations. His boots forced a straight path east. Hers curved slightly toward a fallen elm. My breath came in ragged gasps through the respirator. I tore it off, tasting the damp air. My flashlight flickered, then steadied. I wiped sweat and grime from my brow, heart hammering so loud I felt it in my jaw. "She's out here," I muttered to the fog. No answer but distant echoes of my own voice. I followed her track first, wet pine needles giving way to crunching frost where she'd slipped. Then I picked up his second set, larger prints, deeper, showing a man in a hurry. I thought about calling out, but my voice would carry like an invitation. Instead, I moved silently, one step at a time, listening for anything unnatural. At 4:10, I heard it, the soft scrape of fabric against wood. I froze, heart stalling. The sound came from an old wildlife blind, 12 feet off the ground, nailed to a half-dead pine. I swept my beam upward. The blind's ladder was missing 3 rungs, the platform rotten. I whispered into my radio. Possible suspect location, wildlife blind. I'm checking. No response. I climbed the tree, every movement deliberate. When I reached the platform, it groaned under my weight, but held. I raised my light into the blind's interior. Empty, except for a single shoe. A Converse sneaker, muddy and frayed. No other footprints, no backpack. The fog pressed against the slats, swirling around the sole like a ghost's breath. I knelt to examine the shoe. a child's size matching Marissa's. I snapped a photo with my phone, recorded timestamp 4:12. Then I peered through the fog at ground level. The blind's height gave me a clearer view, a narrow path leading further into the woods, marked by a series of small cairns, stacked stones like a twisted breadcrumb trail. My pulse spiked. This wasn't random. He'd known exactly where to lure her. I climbed down, slipping on a rung and catching myself with a curse. I landed hard, rolled onto my side, then leapt up. I followed the cairns, one stone balanced on a stump, another on a mossy boulder, each spaced 15 yards apart. They formed a line that cut east toward the steep embankment where the river forked. By 4:25, I was at the river's edge. Dark water sluicing around jagged rocks, moving too fast for any swimmer, too shallow for a boat. The bank dropped at a steep angle, mud slick as grease. The cairns ended at a narrow ledge where footprints vanished. I shone my light upstream. Nothing but swirling fog and the sound of moving water. I knelt by the last cairn, pressed my hand to the damp rock. Frost, cold, but not frozen. It felt recently placed. "Marissa," I whispered, voice hoarse, "where are you?" My question was met with silence and the river's roar. I radioed dispatch again, every word clipped through a throat burned by cold. Unit 12. Cairn markers lead to riverbank. No visual on victim. Request water rescue unit and dive team. My words felt like a confession. I was alone out here without backup, and she was somewhere beyond sight. I turned to climb the bank, but the mud gave way, sending me halfway down the slope. I caught a root, scraped my palm, and fell to my knees. I tasted blood. I snarled, hauled myself up, and reached the ledge, just wide enough for one boot. I edged along, balancing on slick ice and frozen roots. My heart felt lodged in my throat. Halfway across, I heard her voice, soft, distant, like a memory. "Deputy, help me." My head snapped up, beam slicing through fog, but no figure, only swirling gray. I edged forward, searching the river's edge. Then I saw her, curled against a boulder, coat shredded, legs pulled tight. Relief and dread collided. "Marissa!" I shouted. She turned her head, eyes glazed with fear and cold. "Deputy?" she murmured, voice thin. I dropped to my knees beside her. "Hold on," I said, pressing my coat over her shoulders. She shook, shivering violently. I reached for my radio. "Please respond. Unit 12 needs immediate EMS and search and rescue at Riverbank." No answer. I stabbed at the PTT button. "Dispatch, do you copy?" Static. I cursed. My phone showed no signal. Of course. She was lying at the edge of nowhere. I tore open my coat, wrapped her in the emergency blanket from my kit. She gasped at the warmth, rubbed her arms. I checked her pulse, steady but slow. I forced a smile. "You're safe, kiddo. We're in this together." Her eyes closed, exhaustion folding her onto me. I gathered her up, slung her over my shoulder like a runner in training. The shock of her weight stole my breath. She was lighter than I expected, frail from exposure, but alive. I turned my back to the river, aimed for higher ground. Every step risked a slip, a fall, and a plunge into freezing water. I had to make it count. At 4:40, I reached a plateau where the fog thinned enough to see shapes, trees, fallen logs, an old jeep half buried in underbrush. I set her down gently and whispered, "Stay with me," as I searched the jeep's door. It was locked, but I found the keys dangling from the ignition. I yanked them free and pried open the door. The windshield was cracked, but the heater still worked. I shoved Marissa inside, closed the door, and jammed the keys into my pocket. Then I climbed into the driver's side and fired up the engine. The heater wheezed to life, fogging the windows, turning the air from Arctic to stifling. Marissa's breathing slowed in the heat. I grabbed the microphone. Unit 12 to dispatch. Extraction vehicle secured at Riverbank Plateau. Moving to road now. I shifted into low gear and eased the Jeep forward, tires spinning in mud, until I found firmer ground. I angled toward the logging camp entrance, guided by the faint glow of distant cruiser lights, thanks to a ranger who finally arrived. At 4:52, I reached the road. Ranger McAdams stood under his high-output lamp, shotgun slung over his back. He rushed over. "Cole, what do you got?" he called, voice lost in engine noise. I thrust Marissa into his arms. "She's cold, but okay." He led me on a path to the river. I punched the radio back to Channel 1. "Dispatch, we have subject. EMS staging at gate. Suspect unknown, last seen heading northeast into federal land. Request state troopers set roadblocks." The ranger climbed into the passenger seat. I nodded once, hard. "Let's get her home," I said. He slammed the door, and I gunned the engine. Mud splashed through fenders as we tore down the road, headlights cutting through parting fog. Marissa curled under a blanket, eyes still closed, though I knew she was awake, listening for my voice. At the camp gate, I stopped, cut the engine. The fog drifted between us and the waiting EMS crew, tall silhouettes under glowing lanterns. I climbed out, unlocked the passenger door, and helped Marissa into an ambulance. She shot me a grateful look, eyes still wet. Then the doors closed. I heard her whisper, "Thank you, Deputy." Then nothing but diesel hum. I turned back to the forest. The trees looked darker now, more imposing. Somewhere in there, the man who called her name was watching, cataloging every move. I should have been relieved, my job done, but I felt only the weight of what I hadn't done. I keyed my radio. "Unit 12, clear here." Overnight call closed. I paused, then added, "But he's still out there." The ranger came up beside me. "You get him?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. "Number, but I'll find him." My words sounded hollow even to my own ears. We walked to our vehicles in silence. My cruiser's door creaked open. I climbed in, closed it with a thud. I rested my head against the wheel for a moment, tasting exhaustion and fear and something like dread. I eased the Jeep onto the highway and watched the edge of the forest recede into the rearview mirror's gloom, convinced that the moment I turned my back, the darkness would claim every soul it ever touched. My hands trembled on the wheel, exhaustion and adrenaline warring in my veins. Marissa was safe, for now, but every mile felt like running deeper into a nightmare that wouldn't end. The highway lights blurred overhead as I drove south toward Ridgeway's main station. My radio crackled to life. "Unit 12, this is dispatch. Good job out there. You can secure your area. Troopers are setting up roadblocks as requested." I murmured a curt thanks. My eyes stung, and I blinked hard, forcing focus onto the road. The station's neon sign appeared, flickering like a broken promise. I parked and stepped out, the spring air cool against my sweat-damp skin. The world here felt normal. Cars trundling past, security cameras blinking. But I knew that would change when I walked inside with the evidence and the story that no one would believe unless they saw it for themselves. I tucked the digital camera and my respirator into my pocket and headed in. At the roll call room, I found Sergeant, Ramirez, and Ranger McAdams, faces drawn. "Report," Ramirez said without raising his head from the laptop. I laid out the camera, the photos, and my notes on the evidence table. Timestamps, footprints mapped, cairn locations, riverbank coordinates. McAdams pointed at the map. "He could have melted into federal land by now," he said. No jurisdiction. I clenched my jaw. So we watch him slip away? I snapped. Ramirez leaned forward. We'll get the feds involved, but first, we secure Marissa's statement and forensics from the camp. Get CSI out there at first light. I nodded, understood. But I didn't believe first light would be soon enough. My mind replayed the hollow echo of his voice. I know your name, Deputy Cole. How many times had I heard it, whispered on the wind, smeared on burned cabins, murmured through Marissa's tears? I locked eyes with McAdams. If he calls my name again, I need to be ready. He gave me a tight nod. By 6:15, the camp was swarming with lights, cameras, and crime scene tape flapping in the breeze. I handed off Marissa to a detective who promised hot coffee and a warm blanket. Her mother clung to her, tears flowing. I watched them, felt a hollow pang. She's going to be okay, the detective said, but I couldn't shake the fear that the nightmare wasn't over. At 7 a.m., I returned to my cruiser for coffee in silence. The cup rattled in the console as I stared at the steam. I pressed the mug to my lips, wincing at its sweetness. Then my phone buzzed, an email from the state crime lab. The blood on the roots matched Marissa's. But more chilling was the secondary result, an unknown male DNA under her fingernails. He'd been close enough for her to scratch him. He'd touched her. And now he was out there. I ducked into the station's small gym, dove into a punching bag, and unleashed the frustration I couldn't voice. Each strike echoed off the concrete walls. 1, anger for the man who preyed on a kid. 2, fear that he'd slip away. 3, shame that I let Marissa slip from my sight even for a second. Sweat and blood mixed on my knuckles. When my arms trembled, I stopped, breathing hard. Ramirez found me there. We got a lead, he said quietly. Camp's security camera at the entrance. They caught something. Something. I followed him, heart hammering. He booted up a grainy clip, a dark sedan half visible in fog, pulling up at the gate at 2:58 a.m., lights off, engine silent. The timestamp read 2:58, 16 minutes before my initial call. The sedan door opened, a tall figure emerged, coat collar up, face turned away. He carried a duffel bag. He paused, looked toward the logging camp, then stepped off camera into darkness. I slowed the video frame by frame. The man's gait, long strides, head jutting forward, matched the cairn path. Ramirez zoomed in on the license plate. Partially illegible, but the letters RDGA dump truck registry came back. Ridgeway Disposal and Haul, registered to a loaner named Glenn Rowe. I felt bile rise. Rowe, ex-con, petty theft, domestic violence, no ties to local logging, a dead end, but his address sat on the edge of those federal woods. "Let's bring him in," I said. Ramirez nodded. "On it." 2 hours later, we arrived at Rowe's trailer. Battered siding, rusted milk crates on the porch, a blue tarp draped over one side. I knocked, badge up, no answer. I waved McAdams over. "We need a warrant," he said. I whispered, "Just let me go in with the camera evidence. I don't care about the warrant." McAdams shook his head. "Cole, procedure." His radio crackled. Unit 15 to dispatch. Unidentified vehicle reported in range 12. Same fog patch near Forest Route 29. License plate matches RDG459. My head snapped around. They'd found the sedan, stopped at a ranger's checkpoint up north, abandoned with keys in the ignition. I cursed. "He's mobile," I muttered. "He's going to disappear." Ramirez barked orders. "Get on him now." McAdams and I climbed into the cruiser. I punched my lights on, defying the fog's appetite for darkness, and gunned the engine. We tore up the road from the station to the checkpoint site. The sedan sat on the shoulder, headlights off, door ajar. I killed the engine and we slipped out, weapons drawn. My heart hammered. I searched the trunk, empty, front seat, nothing but an empty coffee cup, but in the passenger footwell I found a folded piece of notebook paper. On it, 2 handprints in smudged ink and one word, soon. I flipped it over, nothing else. I radioed in. Dispatch, Units 12 and 16 are at the suspect vehicle. Sending photo of note to forensics. Someone responded, copy, dispatching lab unit. I stuffed the paper in an evidence bag and locked the door. He's taunting us, McAdams said quietly. I nodded, jaw clenched. He wants us to chase shadows. A ranger's voice crackled over the radio. Unit Ranger 3, sighting, row on foot, heading west along Ridgeway River. Witness says he ran into the tunnel under the old dam. The dam tunnel, tight, water up to mid-calf, pitch black. Perfect place to vanish. I dropped to one knee by the cruiser. We go now. McAdams pulled me back. Hold up, no backup. We need rappel gear if we're going in. Time stretched. Every second he slipped further away seemed like a betrayal to Marissa and every other victim. I looked at the dark mouth of the tunnel, a yawning void promising more questions than answers. Then I saw movement. A slim silhouette darting along the dam's lip, disappearing into darkness. My blood roared. I ripped the door open, sprinted to the edge, shone my light inside, water rushing, walls slick, fog drifting in from an unseen breach. Row, this is Deputy Cole. Come out with your hands up. My voice boomed, swallowed by the tunnel's maw. Silence answered. Then a chuckle, low, dry, unhinged, echoed from deep within. You think you know my name? The sound clawed at my ears. I swallowed, finger on my mic. Dispatch, possible suspect in tunnel. I'm going in. McAdams tackled me. No, we wait for dive team, he hissed. I wrenched free. I can't wait. The chuckle transformed into a whisper, like wind over broken glass. Cole, come closer. My lawman's oath screamed at me to restrain myself, to call for backup, to follow protocol, but the sound of my own name and his voice blew protocol to hell. I set my jaw. I'm going in, I said. I dropped my rifle, pried off my duty belt, shoved it to McAdams. I pressed a hand to his shoulder. Cover me. Backup's on the way. He swallowed, nodding. I strapped on my belt over my shoulder and slung the rifle across my back. I drew in a deep breath, waded into the tunnel's mouth. Cold water splashed my knees. Currents tugged at my legs. My flashlight was weak, barely piercing the black. I tightened my grip and moved forward. The walls closed in, slick as knives. Every step brought me deeper into a living nightmare. The chuckle followed me, dancing in corners I couldn't see. I never left you, Deputy, he whispered from behind. I spun, light slicing through emptiness. Water lapped at my thighs. My boots found a submerged ledge. I stumbled, and the beam went wild. I rasped out a breath. Protocol said, don't chase suspects alone in confined spaces. But if I didn't follow, he'd vanish again, like smoke in the fog. I called out, voice echoing, show yourself. Enough games. The chuckle became a chorus. His voice multiplied, coming from all directions. The tunnel twisted, water rose to my waist. I felt walls narrow. Then I saw him, lean figure stepping out of the darkness, face half hidden by shadows. He held a length of rope in one hand, grin stretched wide. My flashlight trembled in my grip. My heart slammed. I pointed the rifle, but bullets wouldn't help here. My instincts screamed to run. My gut told me, stay. Let her go, I growled. He shook his head. She's part of the story, Deputy, but now it's your turn. He pulled on the rope. It tightened around my ankle. I splashed forward, heart in my throat. Then, as I lunged, the beam caught him full on. Eyes hollow, a face carved from midnight. He whispered, "Good night, Cole," and I felt cold water surge around me as everything went black. I forced my lungs to draw air as consciousness crept back in, cold, damp, and disoriented. The last thing I remembered was the hooded figure's whisper and the weight of water, closing in. Now, I lay half submerged in frigid current, my uniform soaked and shredded, rifle clutched against my chest like a lifeline. Pain lanced through my ribs, each breath a serrated blade twisting inside me. I blinked, hazy shapes drifting above, the tunnel's jagged ceiling, slick with moss and murky water droplets. Panic clawed at my mind. Had he gone? Was Marissa still out there? I forced a roll, coughing up river water. My left arm screamed as I pushed myself upright. Darkness pressed in from all sides. The beam of my flashlight lay somewhere behind me, extinguished. I groped in the black, fingertips brushing icy stone until I found the metal clasp of my belt. With trembling fingers, I clicked on my spare flashlight. Its beam flickered, then steadied to reveal the tunnel's sloppy walls creeping away on both sides. I struggled to my feet, water at knee height. Each step sent a jolt up my leg, the current tugging me toward deeper sections I could not see. I clutched the stone wall, tracing the tunnel's curve. Somewhere behind me, a low murmur echoed, my own ragged breathing or his voice. I stopped and listened. The drip, drip, drip of water, the whisper of distant air currents. No footsteps. Had he vanished? I waded forward, leaning on the wall, every muscle trembling. My belt buckle snagged on a protruding rebar. I yanked free with a curse. Ahead, I saw a faint glow, my headlight still clinging to life, wedged between rocks where I'd fallen. Relief and dread warred in my chest. I ducked under a low arch, feeling the rush of colder air, and crawled toward the light. When I reached it, I grabbed the flashlight and pointed it down the tunnel. Smooth concrete arched into darkness, half flooded by knee-high water. "Row!" I rasped, voice cracking. "Show yourself, it's over." My words echoed and faded. Silence. Then from the gloom came a soft splash, like a foot entering water. I swiveled, heart hammering. The beam caught him. A silhouette hunched near the far wall, hood fallen back, face pale and slick with sweat or rain. His eyes shone silver in my light. He lifted one finger to his lips, then spoke in a low, amused drawl. "You should have stayed with her." I raised my rifle, but the tunnel's arch warped distance. Fire wasn't an option. I took a step forward, water sloshed around my thighs. "Where is she?" I growled. He tilted his head, voice gentle yet barbed. "Safe, for now." But this place is hungry for secrets. "Are you ready to feed it yours?" My gut twisted. What did he mean? He crouched, sliding one wet hand along the wall, tracing rust stains that dripped like tears. With that hand, he carved letters into the damp concrete. C-O-L-E, my name. I felt bile rise. He knew me, inside and out. "Let her go," I demanded. My teeth chattered, not just from cold. He chuckled, the sound ricocheting. I already did. "But she's part of the story now. You can't close this chapter, because you're the one writing it." He stepped toward me. I aimed my rifle, but water obscured his footfalls. He emerged into the light, close enough that I saw the scars along his jaw. Old cuts, healed poorly. His grin was too wide, too eager. He held something small and metallic. Marissa's digital camera. The lens cracked. He waved it like a trophy. My stomach dropped. He'd taken evidence, taken her voice, and now held the record of everything. My finger hovered on the trigger. My training screamed at me to shoot. But as I stared down the barrel, his expression shifted. Pity, almost sorrow. He lowered the camera and pressed it against his chest, where I glimpsed printed paper tucked beneath the strap. Pages from Marissa's high school essay, damp and smeared. He'd made it part of him, part of this twisted narrative. "Finish it, deputy," he whispered, voice soft as falling rain. "Write your confession." He raised a finger again, placed it over his heart. "You've already broken the code. You left her. You left me. And now you've come here, to my domain. This tunnel is the truth beneath Ridgway County's bones. It's where all the things we bury come back to life." A rumble vibrated through the tunnel. Water cascading from somewhere deeper, the current surging. He stepped back into darkness. I felt the beam flicker. "Answer me!" I shouted, advancing. The tunnel constricted, water rising. He retreated, silhouette disappearing in folds of shadow. "This is your final draft," he called, voice fading. "Turn back or perish in your own narrative." He vanished. The echo of his footsteps died. Only my breath filled the tunnel now. Ragged gasps sprayed out with each word. I dropped my rifle and cupped my hands, bringing them to my burnt lips. I could stay and die here, torn apart by currents and his riddles. Or turn away and let him fade into myth, untouchable. A ghost who knew my name. I waded back toward the mouth of the tunnel, every step heavy as a confession. The water lapped at my belt. The current tugged. I turned once, shining my light behind me. Empty tunnel, walls still etched with my name. No body, no camera, no echo of his voice, just the endless reach of darkness. At the entrance, I paused. The air outside was crisp, a world removed from this concrete maw. I pressed the radio. "Unit 12 to dispatch." Silence. I cursed, slammed my fist into the wall. My knuckles stung, skin split. The tunnel seemed to pulse in response, alive with unseen breaths. I finally spoke. "Dispatch, I can't. Suspect's gone. No trace. I'm exiting the tunnel. Over." My voice cracked, swallowed by static. I turned my back on the arch, waded the last few feet, and emerged into the dawn's gray light. The forest alive with morning birdsong. Birds unaware of the horrors beneath. I staggered toward my cruiser, bloodied, bruised, hollow. I slid into the driver's seat, rested my head against the steering wheel. The scratches on my arms stung. I checked the time, 6:45. Almost 2 hours had passed. I hit the mic. "Unit 12 clear, suspect at large, subject safe, but I have questions." I paused, voice raw. "And I'm not sure I want the answers." I drove away, dawn spilling across the asphalt. Behind me, the tunnel yawned shut, hidden beneath an unassuming dam. Ridgway County's darkness had swallowed its secrets once more. I rolled into the station parking lot, headlights cutting through mist clinging to asphalt. My uniform was sodden, sleeves torn, belt hanging loose. I didn't bother with a restroom mirror. I knew the face that stared back at me. Hollowed eyes, cheeks drawn, the weight of what I'd encountered etched into every line. I let myself into the station, boots echoing down the corridor. Voices rose and fell behind closed doors. Coffee brewing, radios chirping. The mundane symphony of a department that believed daylight chased monsters away. I headed straight for dispatch. "Dispatch," I said, voice rough. "I'm back. No sign of him in the tunnel. Marissa's safe at Children's Hospital. I need the file opened for Roe and anyone linked to RDG 459. And I want surveillance footage from every checkpoint on Forest Route 29. The dispatcher's calm tone belied the storm inside me. "Yes, Deputy Cole. All units notified. We'll begin review immediately." I exhaled. Procedure reasserted itself. Reports to file, evidence to catalog, interviews to conduct. But procedure felt fragile, like a single sheet of paper against a hurricane. I collected my gear, the camera with thumbnails of abandoned cabins, the note smeared with "soon," my service weapon still warm. Each item was proof of the nightmare I'd lived. But would they believe it? I found Detective Lyle in the briefing room. He stood over a cluttered desk, maps and printouts spread in disarray. He looked up, eyebrows raised. "Cole," he said, "we've got the damn checkpoint video from a civilian dash cam. It shows Rose sedan pulling up, door opening, Marissa stumbling out. She's alone for almost 2 minutes before you arrive." He paused, flipping through frames. "Then you appear, flashlight beam scanning, and she collapses into your arms, but no sign of him. He's gone." I ran a hand through my hair. "He wanted me to find her," I said. "Then he wanted me to chase him." Lyle nodded. "He's smart. He disappeared into federal land. No cell, no roads. We'll need the U.S. Marshals and Forest Service to sweep. But that could take days." I clenched my jaw. Days too long. He slid a photo across the desk, the close-up of Rose's face taken by a dash cam, a grainy shot, eyes wild, mouth curved in that grin. The resemblance to his cracked photo in the cabin was undeniable. We're also looking at local mental health admissions. A guy named Raymond Cole, a writer who disappeared in '98, matches Rose's description. He vanished after his daughter went missing. Never found. My name caught in my throat. Raymond Cole, my father's name. I stared at the printout. "That can't be," Lyle said. "Look at the file. He was a detective's kid, disappeared 10 years ago. Name never changed. He had a killer's mind." My vision blurred. Father's old phone calls, crackling warnings of unseen darkness, flashed behind my eyes. He used to tell me, "Stay sharp, son. Darkness knows your name." I exhaled, voice hollow. He was grooming me. Lyle looked at me, concern in his eyes. "Cole, you okay?" I swallowed. We're running out of roads to chase him. But the fog of this place, he's woven it into every report, every crime scene. God help me if he's made me part of it. He nodded. "You did good getting Marissa out. And you'll find him. We'll all find him." I offered a tight smile. "I hope we find the right man." By mid-afternoon, I was in the interrogation room, watching Marissa's mother embrace her daughter. Tears and relief mingled, promises of counseling and safety plans shared. But as I observed, I felt the familiar tug, a sense of unfinished business. Her rescue was a victory, but not the end. Darkness had names, and it never forgot one. When I finally stepped outside, I found my cruiser waiting. I opened the door, slipped inside, and closed it gently. I rested my head against the headrest, closed my eyes. The day's light filtered through the windshield, casting long shadows across the dashboard. I reached into my pocket for my respirator, no longer for smog, but for breath itself. I lifted it to my face, inhaled, and the cold silicone pressed against my skin. I clicked on the radio. "All units, be advised. Suspect may have ties to County Road 15 residences. Check any abandoned properties. And if you hear his voice, don't answer." My voice wavered. Then I turned the dial to the Ranger frequency. "If you find anything, any cairns, any smears, call me." Static crackled. Then, "Understood, Deputy." I ended the transmission and set the mic aside. The gas pedal beckoned. The engine purred. I glanced once more at the empty seat beside me, the one Marissa had occupied, and remembered his words. Write your confession. I inhaled deeply and shifted into drive. As I pulled onto the road, the station disappearing behind me, I watched the trees lean in as if listening. The fog lingered in pockets, waiting to swallow the taillights. And in the rearview mirror, just for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing at the tunnel's entrance, silhouette fixed in stone, beckoning me back. I drove through the afternoon haze toward the dam, the road's cracks writhing under the tires like scars. My uniform was still damp in places, but by now the sun had burned off most of the morning mist. I'd spent hours filing reports, debriefing with detectives and offering statements to regional command, and yet nothing felt complete. Rowe remained unaccounted for, his crimes documented but not contained. And in the hollows of my mind, his last words echoed like a promise: write your confession. By early evening, I found myself back at the tunnel entrance. The dam loomed overhead, concrete teeth gripping earth and water. Below, the tunnel mouth yawned, dark and silent. Yellow crime scene tape fluttered half-heartedly in the breeze, already fraying. I stepped under it, feeling a familiar shiver. The sun had begun its descent, sending slanted orange beams across the water's ripples. I keyed the mic one more time. Unit 12. Final check on the tunnel. No backup needed. I knew they'd expect me back at the station, but I couldn't leave. Not after what I'd seen, not after what he'd done to the girl, and not after what he'd shown me about myself. I took a deep breath, inhaled the scent of moss and decay, and clicked on my headlamp. Inside, the water was still, reflecting my light in careful patterns. The walls bore graffiti, some juvenile tagging, some rust streaks, and beneath them scratched words I hadn't noticed before. Don't forget. The letters were shallow, as if carved by someone with urgency. My pulse quickened. I ran a gloved finger along the etching. The concrete was damp, the scratch marks fresh. I waded deeper, each step sending ripples that carried echoes of distant dripping. At the bend, my beam caught something new, a length of rope tied to a rebar loop, trailing into a side alcove. The rope's fibers were slick, frayed at the end, fresh. I gripped it, tugged. It held fast. My stomach turned. I'd thought he'd abandoned the tunnel, but this meant he'd returned, or he'd never left. I clicked the mic again, voice low. Dispatch. Evidence found at tunnel. Rope tied to rebar. Possible recent use. Repeat. Recent use. No answer. They'd gone home. I tucked the mic away and knelt, running my fingers over the rope's fibers. Dirt and some dark flakes, possibly blood or rust. I pressed my nose to it. The acrid tang stung my nostrils. I felt a familiar knot of dread. Someone had passed through here very recently. Someone like him. I heard a faint whisper, Deputy Cole. My head snapped up, heart hammering. The voice had come from my left. I raised my rifle, shone my light toward the alcove. Darkness pressed back. I took a step forward. The air grew colder, denser. I heard something scrape against stone, almost too subtle to notice, but I froze, every nerve alight. "Show yourself," I barked. My voice echoed, swallowed by the tunnel's vault. Only dripping water responded. The rope's end trailed into the alcove's darkness. I edged closer, rifle steady. The beam caught movement, thin shadows flickering. I jolted and fired a shot into the black. The concussion rattled my ribs, my head snapped back. No echo of screams, no shout of pain, only water's relentless drip. I advanced, ankle deep in cold water. My breath came in shallow bursts. The beam danced on rough walls, then caught a face. Pale skin stretched tight over hollow eyes. Face pressed against the tunnel's darkness. Rowe? No. Marissa's reflection in the water's curve, eyes wide. I stumbled, firing another round into the reflection, smashing a chunk of concrete, sending debris into the water. I coughed, wiping a mix of dust and water from my face. The reflection was gone. My heart thundered. My rifle trembled in my hands. Was she here? I waded forward, probing the water with my boots. The rope swung gently, precisely, despite no breeze. The alcove beckoned, a gaping maw studded with rusted pipes. I pressed my forehead to the beam, shining it inward. Nothing. Empty concrete. Yet the rope's end was frayed, wet as if freshly pulled. I gripped it, felt tension. With a sudden jerk, the rope tightened, pulling against me. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the rifle. My pulse spiked. Was someone pulling from beyond my sight? I braced, yanked the rope free. It fell slack, coiling in the water. I let out a shaky breath. Then I saw it, footprints in the mud above the waterline. One set, large, deeply pressed, leading away toward the dam's interior. And beside them, a smaller set, uneven, tentative, Marissa's. My gut clenched. I hurried to the shore, tried to follow them, but the tunnel's curve swallowed my beam. The prints vanished around the bend, consumed by black. My radio crackled. Static first, then dispatch. Unit 12, emergency at station, contact lost. They were scrambling, but it was too late. I was alone again. I retrieved the digital camera from my pocket, turned it on. The last file captured was a photograph of me, rifle raised, staring into the darkness. Timestamp, just now. But behind me, the figure's blurred reflection. Rose, grin, frozen in the water's shot. My stomach lurched. I lowered the camera, sliding it into my jacket. I took a deep breath, waded back toward the entrance. Each step felt heavier, as if the water resisted me. I could have fled, called for backup, retreated to safety, but something deeper pulled me back, a duty that refused to let go. I reached the tunnel mouth, stepped onto dry ground, and turned to face the dark interior one last time. The sun had set, and the sky bled purple overhead. Night reclaimed the dam and its secrets. My flashlight's beam trembled as I shone it into the tunnel, catching on carved letters higher up. I know you. My blood ran cold. A whisper drifted on the wind, barely audible over the rush of the river. Goodbye, Deputy Cole. I froze, the weight of those words anchoring me in place. Somewhere deep inside, I knew he wasn't gone. Not really. Ridgeway's darkness had woven itself into my soul. I pressed my hand against the cool concrete wall, feeling its damp heartbeat. He called my name one final time, carried on the wind and water, leaving no footprint but his voice. I turned away, each step heavy with dread and resolve. The dam loomed behind me, silent but alive. I climbed into my cruiser, engine off, headlights powerless against the encroaching night. The road ahead was empty, waiting. I stared through the windshield, at the flickering crime scene tape, at the silent mouth of the tunnel. There would be no closure tonight, no triumphant end. Only the echo of a name whispered in darkness, and the promise that some stories never end. They only grow deeper, twisting through the mind long after the lights go out. I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead against the steering wheel, tasting fear and defiance in equal measure. And in the dim glow of the dam's floodlights, I heard it again, soft, distant, unrelenting. Cole? I didn't answer. I remember the call coming through just before sundown on November 3rd, 2018. An unremarkable Saturday until the dispatcher's voice cracked with urgency. It was 17:48 when Deputy Samuel Granger, punched in 10:26, and flicked on my overhead lights, rolling out of the station in cruiser 2143. The sky hung low with slate-gray clouds, promising rain before midnight. The autumn air bit at exposed skin, carrying the scent of dying leaves and damp earth. I'd spent 12 years patrolling these winding back roads of Caldwell County, Missouri, but nothing quite prepares you for the dread that tingles in your spine the instant you suspect something's wrong. Dispatch reported a missing person call. A local farmer's daughter hadn't returned from a weekend visit with friends at a hunting cabin near Cedar Ridge. Her mother, Alice Donnelly, had called in frantic after dark fell, and her cell phone went straight to voicemail. The girl, Emily, was 18, an Eagle Scout with a knack for staying in touch. The idea that she could simply vanish in this thickly wooded region felt impossible, and yet every indication pointed to just that. I flipped on the rear camera mic and guided my cruiser down Route K, tires crunching over stray acorns and gravel. My radio crackled with terse reports. Animal control units en route with dogs. Another deputy mobilized to secure the Donnelly farmhouse. By 1805, I reached the junction of Route K and County Road 113, the last spot where Emily's friends said they saw her truck. A battered red Toyota Tacoma sat half buried in the shoulder mud, engine off, keys dangling from the ignition. Its hazard lights blinked weakly, as if distressed. I clicked off my cruiser's lights and eased out, letting the darkness swallow me. My flashlight cut a pale arc into the gathering shadows, reflecting off the Tacoma's chipped bumper and shattered passenger side mirror. The cab was empty, save for a crumpled map of the Ozark Trail and a lone hairpin on the console. No purse, no phone, nothing. I keyed my mic. Dispatch, Unit 2143 on scene. Abandoned Tacoma, no occupants, beginning perimeter check. The response was calm but clipped. Copy that. K9 ETA 2 minutes. I slipped my service pistol free, holstering the taser under my ammo pouch out of habit. I edged around the rear of the truck, sweeping my light across the dense undergrowth. Oak and hickory branches tangled overhead, webbing the sky and stifling what little light remained. A thin mist drifted at ground level, swirling around the chassis like fingers seeking escape. At 1811, I found the first clue. A single boot print in the soft mud, roughly 10 inches long, pointed inland. The tread was military style, heavy lug prints spaced in even intervals. I crouched, counting the grooves, then traced a second print. Smaller, sandal style, almost childlike. My heart thumped against my ribcage as I realized the impossible. 2 sets of tracks, paired, weaving together into the forest. I snapped a quick photo with my patrol phone, then radioed dispatch. Tracks heading northeast, 2 subjects, 1 adult, 1 juvenile. Requesting immediate backup at grid reference 38.9250 degrees north, 93.778 7 degrees west. No sooner had I spoken than a low rumble rolled through the trees, our K9 unit, kennel lights bobbing in the distance. Ranger, the German shepherd, bolted ahead, his muzzle glowing with the reflection of my flashlight. Handler, Deputy Chloe Ramirez, followed close behind. I holstered my pistol, letting Chloe take point. Ranger nosed along the tracks, ears pricked, whimpering softly. Together, we plunged deeper into the woods, the world shrinking to the beam of our lights and the insistent crunch of leaves beneath our boots. By 1817, the mist thickened into a haze that clung to skin and uniform alike. My respirator at my side felt suddenly necessary, though the air wasn't toxic. It was simply the oppressive stillness of these ancient pines. I glanced up at their bent, moss-draped branches and thought of the countless hunters who'd come before, and how easy it was to lose your way when the woods closed in around you. Ranger halted at a small clearing, hackles raised. Chloe shone her light where he stood, revealing a crumpled piece of clothing tangled in low brambles. A girl's hoodie, pale pink with floral stitching. She picked it up without touching the fabric, snapping a sanitized evidence bag around it. The hood's edge was smeared with dark stains that might have been mud, or something worse. My stomach clenched. "Emily's," I muttered. We pressed on, Ranger's pause silent as he led us uphill toward a ridge. At 1823, we came upon a rusted-out Chevy Suburban, half hidden by blackberry thorns, its windows opaque with grime. The doors were locked, but the back window had been shattered. Glass shards glinting like broken stars in our flashlight beams. Ranger's whine grew urgent. He nosed through the jagged opening, then shot back a single look. Concerned, taut, warning. Chloe tapped my arm. "Deputy, look at this." She pointed to the cargo area. There, scrawled on the faded carpet floor in what looked like charcoal or ash, were letters, H-E-L-P. The marks were fresh, the edges still crumbly. My pulse pounded in my ears. Who had written that? And why leave the truck, then scrawl a message begging for rescue? I crouched beside the Suburban, running gloved fingers along the ridge of each letter. The charcoal dust transferred to my gloves. I radioed dispatch again. Subject inside Suburban. Possible evidence of victim contact. Requesting crime scene unit. Advise coroner on standby. The reply came. Copy. Standby for CSI K9 indicates scent heading north. We followed Ranger's light through a tangle of fallen logs and brambles. Branches clawed at our uniforms. Sweat beaded on my brow despite the chill. At 1829, the ground leveled into a sunken hollow ringed by trees so close you could touch them all at once. In the center lay a shallow pit, half collapsed, as though someone had dug from below, then abandoned the hole. The earth at its edge was freshly turned. A faint, sour odor whispered of something long buried. I flagged Chloe back. We set up a perimeter. I radioed in coordinates and described the depression. Deputy, be advised. Words out to hold position. CSI en route. My radio clicked off, leaving only the forest's hush. I clicked my flashlight down to its lowest setting and crept forward, pistol gripped at the ready. The pit's lip was ragged. Inside, damp roots curled like tangled veins. I shone the beam downward. Something reflected back, a glint of metal. I leaned over, stomach knotting as I recognized the smooth curve of a child's toy, half submerged in loose earth. I felt the ground shift under my weight. My flashlight flickered. I steadied my breath. Somewhere above, a twig snapped, and Ranger barked once, sharp and anxious. My radio crackled. Backup had arrived on the scene proper, but none had ventured this far. I whispered into the dark hollow, "Emily? Can you hear me?" No answer came, only the echo of my own voice swallowed by the pit. I straightened, spine rigid. I could almost taste the fear, not just mine, but Emily's, and perhaps the presence of whoever or whatever dragged her here. My heart thudded in my throat as I inched back toward the Chloe and Ranger. Somewhere beyond those trees, a figure watched, hidden in the gloom, and whatever it was, it hadn't waited. The forest pressed in around me like a living thing, branches draping overhead until the sky vanished, swallowed by dark green needles and tangled tendrils. It was 1836 when I finally tore myself away from that hollow, my boots sliding on loose dirt as I scrambled back toward Chloe and Ranger. My chest heaved, every breath tasting of cold earth and something fouler I couldn't name. Chloe stood just beyond the ring of tree roots, torchlight wavering over her face. Ranger whined low, ears flat, as though he sensed the weight of the woods closing in behind us. We didn't speak. Words felt hollow. Instead, we moved together, a single unit, winding through the trees toward where we'd left our radios and the rest of the team. Every snap of twig underfoot made me flinch. Every rustle in the brush sent adrenaline coursing through my veins. I checked my watch, 1839. That call signaled dispatch's last log, but they hadn't heard from us since the pit. Backup was supposed to be here. Where were they? A flash of white caught my eye to the left. I froze. Chloe halted mid-step. Ranger stiffened, hackles up. There, pinned to a sapling by a length of barbed wire, was Emily's hiking backpack, zipper torn, fabric shredded. The straps looped grotesquely around the tree's thorny bark. I swallowed a dry lump in my throat and stepped closer. The beam of my flashlight illuminating a crumpled patch of fabric caught on the spikes. A photo ID card, cracked plastic, bearing a picture of Emily on her last birthday. The sight sent a cold wave crashing down my spine. I reached out, careful not to touch any more than necessary, and bagged the ID as evidence. Chloe circled the tree, snapping photos. Ranger nosed around the base, then cut into the undergrowth again, following a scent only he could perceive. I holstered my pistol, switching to the less lethal taser. One wrong move here could cost a life. My radio crackled at last. A tense voice. "Unit 312, where are you? We're at the junction of Route K and County 113. Do you copy?" It was Captain Reynolds. Relief and guilt knotted inside me. I'd strayed too far. I keyed the mic. "Captain, this is Deputy Granger. Found evidence of victim contact, backpack and ID. Moving to your position now. Repeat, moving to your position." He responded, directing us back toward the road. Ranger led, weaving between trunks with uncanny ease. I followed, Chloe close at my side. The forest seemed endless. Shadows piled upon one another until depth and distance lost meaning. By 1845, we broke through the trees onto the gravel road, headlights glaring from Captain Reynolds' unmarked SUV. Deputy Martinez and 3 other officers stood by, flashlights and weapons drawn, faces grim. I dropped to one knee, gulping air, as Reynolds strode over. He barked orders, securing the scene and dispatching additional units to grid coordinates around the hollow. Reynolds glanced at me, eyes sharp. "Samuel, what do you have?" I told him everything. The Tacoma, the tracks, the Fitbit sweatshirt, the suburban message, then the pit, the toy, and finally the backpack and ID. His jaw tightened. He nodded once. "Good work. We'll get CSI out here. Stay close." A chill wind rustled the pines. Fallen leaves skittered across the road. I watched as officers fanned out, marking trees with flagging tape and laying out numbered evidence markers. Chloe and I set up a temporary command post by the Tacoma. I leaned against its dented fender, shaking so hard I feared I'd drop my pistol. She placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. "Granger," she said quietly, voice steady. "We'll find her." But I knew hope was a fragile thing, snapped under pressure. At 1852, the first CSI unit arrived. White vans rolling in with lab lights and evidence kits. The lead technician, a tall woman with wireframe glasses, approached me. "Deputy, we need your full statement before any processing. Then you'll have to stay clear while we dust for prints." I nodded numbly. While she began her questions, I scanned the tree line beyond the glowing emergency lights. Somewhere in that darkness, Emily Donnelly was trapped, injured, or worse. My radio crackled again. This time a medical team reporting they'd found a second hollow 30 yards west. I exchanged a look with Chloe. She didn't speak, she just lifted her flashlight and we moved. The second pit was smaller, deeper, carved into a natural depression between 2 sandstone outcroppings. Mud caked its walls, footprints slick with debris. Chloe knelt, shining her beam inside. I peered in next to her. There, half buried in mud, lay a blood-soaked scrap of denim. Too small for Emily's jeans, but unmistakably human. My stomach twisted. I backed away, hands raised. My radio screeched with incoming calls. More units arriving, a request for K9 to rejoin, a civil EMT team prepping trauma kits. The scene blurred, flashing lights, radio chatter, acrid smell of fear. I closed my eyes, saw Emily's face in every tree root and between every beam of light. By 1905, they'd cordoned off a 3-acre radius. Officers in reflective vests ushered bystanders away. A line of patrol cars stretched down the road. Captain Reynolds barked instructions, coordinating teams, relaying my initial findings. I realized I was still clutching my flashlight, knuckles white. I exhaled slowly, forcing my heart to calm. My radio crackled. "Deputy Granger, do you copy? You need to get checked out by medics. Sounds like you've been through hell." I rubbed at my sweaty brow. "I'll be fine, just need to see this through." He pressed. "You okay to keep working?" I hesitated, felt the weight of responsibility settle on me. "I'm okay," I said, "but someone needs to get in that cabin. If she's there, we can't wait." The hunting cabin lay 2 miles north, down a 1/4 mile of rocky service road. A ghostly structure, whitewashed and windowless on one side, boarded up on the other. Emily's friends had said she went there to change into warmer clothes after the sun dropped, then called out to them, but got no answer. The cabin's only access was a narrow path through waist-high grass. No power to the building, no cell phone reception. Perfectly isolated. By 1918, a tactical team of 4 were geared up, flashlights and rifles at the ready. Captain Reynolds motioned me forward. He said, "You found all this evidence, Sam. You're the best lead we got. If anyone's going to bring her out, it's you." My jaw clenched. The adrenaline returned, sharper now, tempered by dread. I followed the team down the overgrown path, quiet save for the click of boots on rock and the distant hum of insects. Mist curled around our ankles. The trees thinned. Ahead, the cabin's silhouette rose like a tombstone against the deepening night. We fanned out around the perimeter, cutting through the grass until I made it to the front door, a rotting wooden slab, warped by years of neglect. Chloe hit her light against it. "I see scuff marks," she whispered. "Someone tried to push it open from inside." I slid my shoulder against the door, gave it a shove. It groaned, hinges protesting, then swung inward on cracked wood. The beam of my flashlight shot across a dark interior, dust motes dancing in the beam, revealing scattered chairs, overturned table, and a splintered window frame. Something small moved near the far corner, a dark shape half hidden in shadow. My pistol rose instinctively. "Freeze!" I barked. "Caldwell County Sheriff's Office. Show yourself." The shape didn't move. Ranger's bark echoed from behind me. My pulse thundered. Whoever, or whatever, was inside had been watching. Then the shape shifted, small and pale. A girl, crouched, arms wrapped around her legs, head down. Emily. Her eyes lifted, wide and unfocused, the beam of my flashlight catching tears glistening on her cheeks. Her clothes were torn, her hair matted with grime. She looked neither at me nor at Chloe. Her gaze fixed somewhere beyond the doorway, as if she still saw the thing that had held her. I holstered my pistol and knelt slowly, hands open. "Emily, it's okay, we're here, you're safe now." Her breathing was shallow, uneven. She didn't respond. Ranger nosed past me, nuzzling her hand. She flinched, but didn't pull away. I glanced around the cabin. Scratch marks on walls, smears on floorboards. Signs of struggle, but no clear trail to explain. The tactical team stood at the threshold, rifles slack but ready. One whispered to Captain Reynolds, "What do we do with her? Medical or booking?" Reynolds cut him a look. Medical, obviously. He waved in EMTs who rushed forward, assessment kits in hand. I stayed by Emily, guiding her onto a waiting blanket. She murmured something. "They won't wait," before her head lolled against Ranger's side. Chloe checked her vitals. I radioed dispatch. "Subject in custody of EMS. Cab secured. Request Child Protective Services." My voice wavered. This was supposed to be routine, just another overdue call. Instead, we'd uncovered a nightmare. EMTs loaded Emily onto a stretcher and rolled her toward the waiting ambulance. I watched until the taillights disappeared down the overgrown road. The night air pressed in, instantly silent without helicopters or sirens. Ranger sat beside me, ears flicked back. I collected my radio. "Dispatch, Unit 2143, scene secure, returning to station to file supplement." The reply crackled. "Copy, Granger. Good work tonight, get some rest." I looked back at the cabin, its windows like dead eyes, and thought of the footprints, the pit, the messages scrawled in ash. I didn't know what had happened in that hollow, or why Emily had been taken. I only knew that whatever it was still out there, lurking beyond the beam of my flashlight, waiting for the next call. I pressed my palm against the cold metal of the cabin's outer wall, the rough paint peeling under my fingertips, and take a deep breath. The wind has fallen silent now, as though the forest itself is holding its breath, waiting to see what we do next. It's 1945 on the dashcam's recorded timestamp. Nearly 2 hours since that first alarm call, and for the first time tonight I allow myself to feel what hides behind the duty-bound calm. Bone-deep exhaustion and a pulse that won't settle. Captain Reynolds nods at me from the perimeter. He's still in full uniform, but I can see the fatigue in his eyes, that slight slump in his shoulders. Even on the best nights, patrol shifts in Caldwell County can stretch a deputy beyond his limits. Tonight, we've teetered on the edge of something darker than any foot chase or domestic disturbance. I glance back at the cabin door, now boarded up for evidence preservation, and catch Chloe's eye. She forces a small, determined nod. We'll get Emily's statement once she's stable, then piece together exactly what happened here. "Samuel," Reynolds calls, his radio clipped to his collar. "I need you to review Emily's interview once it comes through. I want your insight on her timeline, down to the minute if we can get it." His tone is firm but gentle. "Get cleaned up. We'll debrief at Station HQ." I swallow and nod. My legs are leaden, but I force myself upright. Chloe falls into step beside me as we retrace our path through the tall grass. Ranger pads silently ahead, pausing now and then to sniff the air. The moon, newly risen, casts pale light through the thinning clouds, illuminating the broken forest floor in silvery relief. Fallen logs crumble beneath foot. Each footprint I leave feels like a promise I can't keep, that Emily will be okay, that no one else will vanish out here again. By 1952, the forest thins into roadside scrub brush. Traffic on Route K is slow tonight, motorists craning to see the flashing lights, some slowing down to rubberneck. We wave them on, keeping our faces stoic. Dispatch calls and a request, air support. A small medical chopper is en route to pick up Emily and ferry her to Truman Medical Center in Kansas City. The thought of her lying in that stretcher, frightened and injured, tugs at my gut. But if this place has proven anything, it's that hope comes in measured doses, and when you need it, you cling tight. I check my watch again, 1956. The dark has settled fully now. Even with overhead lights and portable lamps, the cabin and surrounding woods look ominous, as if at any moment something might emerge from beyond our beams. Tonight, we saw evidence of horror. Blind pits, messages scrawled in ash, toys half buried, backpacks torn on barbed wire. None of it makes sense in any ordinary crime scene, and yet Emily came out of that cabin alive, if shaken and traumatized, but alive. At 1959, I step onto pavement. My boots make that familiar hollow thud, and I realize I haven't felt solid ground underfoot in hours. Chloe stands at the edge of the road, phone in hand, reviewing her notes. We quietly compare observations. 0, 0, 0, 7. Emily's mother calls 911, reports daughter overdue, phone dead. 1748. My initial dispatch, en route to missing woman call. 1805, arrival at abandoned Tacoma, no occupants. 1811, discovery of dual tracks, adult and juvenile. 1817, ranger locates pink hoodie, blood-tinged. 1823, suburban with help message in ash. 1829, first hollow, child's toy, possible burial site. 1836, backpack and ID on barbed wire. 1845, a second hollow, blood-soaked denim scrap. 1918, forced entry at hunting cabin. Emily found alive. Chloe lowers her voice. Sam, something about these intervals. They cluster around the hour marks. Every 6 minutes something major happened. It's like a ticking clock. I nod. Patterns can help predict behavior. If whoever did this returns to one of those spots, or worse, if another victim is missing in the same cycle. We hear the distant thrum of helicopter rotors as it approaches. A spotlight sweeps across the treetops, catching glimpses of dew on pine needles. EMTs guide Emily onto a hoist, straps secure around the stretcher. I watch through binoculars as she's lifted up and away. For a moment, her gaze catches mine. I lower the binoculars, swallow thickly. I promised her we'd get her home. It's the last tangible thing I can do tonight. By 2012, the chopper disappears into the cloud cover, and the forest reclaims the silence. Only the distant hum of generators remains at the roadside staging area. We pack up portable lights. The CSI vans and K9 units start to pull out. I feel the weight of every discarded evidence marker in my pack, as though each one is a shard of the night's terror that I can't shake off. Chloe turns to me. "You heading back?" she asks, voice soft. I nod, exhaustion making my limbs tremble. "Yeah, Reynolds wants us at HQ in 30. They'll run Emily's interview for us then." She offers a faint smile. "Good work, Sam. We saved her." I can't fully accept that yet, but I give a curt nod in return. The ride back to the station is silent. My cruiser's engine is the only sound as I follow Chloe's car along the winding road. The dashboard clock reads 2027. My reflection flickers in the rearview mirror, pale, haunted eyes, shoulders slumped deeper than they were before. I turn off the radio. Tonight, words are scarce. At Station HQ, the fluorescent lights burn white and harsh. Captain Reynolds meets us in the briefing room, already prepared with recordings and transcripts. He motions us to seats. I slump into mine, unholstering my pistol and setting it aside. Our phones buzz with incoming messages. Family members asking for updates, news outlets sniffing for a story, internal affairs inquiries, all demanding answers before we can even breathe. Reynolds dims the overhead projector and cues up the 911 call audio. Alice Donnelly's frantic voice crackles through the speakers. We listen as she begs for help, breathless with despair. The tape ends. Reynolds turns to me. "Sam, go over your recollection. What did Emily say once she was conscious?" My throat tightens as I recall kneeling beside her in that cabin. Her words were nearly incomprehensible, a whisper torn between relief and terror. "They don't wait. Don't let them. You can't run fast enough." I pause. She saw something in that cabin, or felt something. She tried to write help, but then she said they came back before she could finish. Reynolds leans forward. "Who is they? Any description?" I shake my head. Dark shapes, no faces, just shadows that moved on their own. Chloe exhales. "She said the pit outside. There were more holes moving along the tree line, like doorways, and that toy. It wasn't hers." I glance between them. "She said she heard a whisper right before we got there, said her name, and told her not to come back." Silence fills the room. Reynolds rubs his temples. "We'll get her full statement tomorrow. For now, we need to secure the entire Cedar Ridge area. No one goes in until daylight. Air support will keep rotating." He looks up, voice low. "And Sam, get some rest." I stand, voice hoarse. "Yes, sir." The room clears out, leaving just me and Chloe. She claps a hand on my shoulder. "See you in the morning." I nod, absently reaching for my cap. The hallway lights throw long shadows as I exit, each one stretching toward the door like reaching hands. Out on the station steps, the night wind has risen again, rattling the eaves. I pull my jacket tighter and look up at the sky. Clear now, stars glinting. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the trees, the things that nearly killed a teenager lie waiting. I close my eyes and breathe deeply. I've seen today what shouldn't exist. But tomorrow I'll go back. For Emily's sake. And because out here the next call could be mine. And I couldn't live with knowing I walked away. The station's fluorescent glare burned behind me as I stepped into the chill night air, the door closing with a hollow clang that sounded far too loud against the quiet. My boots crunched on the gravel lot. Each step a reminder that I was still standing when so many things out there wanted me to fall. I slid into Cruiser 2143, the leather seat still warm from the day's stakeouts, and let the engine idle. I unholstered my service pistol and laid it on the passenger seat, then leaned forward, forehead against the steering wheel, closing my eyes against the swirl of flashbacks. It was 2103 when I finally collected myself enough to radio dispatch, Unit 214, 3 inbound to home base. ETA 5 minutes. No response. They must have already shifted channels to monitor the perimeter around Cedar Ridge. I turned the key, pulled onto the road, and coasted through the station gates. Headlights carving twin rivers of light down asphalt, slick from an earlier drizzle. My mind replayed the cabin scene. Emily's pale face illuminated by my flashlight, her whisper echoing in my ears. They don't wait. Even now, I could feel the weight of those words, the terror in her eyes. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened, trying to force my pulse back into a regular rhythm. Route K stretched out before me, empty except for the whisper of my tires and the faint flutter of something caught in the guardrail. Perhaps a page from Emily's map, torn by panic or the wind. I swung the Cruiser around it and returned it to the roadbed, heart thudding. The radio was silent, but in my mind was an unbroken static. Those holes in the forest floor, the shards of denim, the shifted earth that never should have been there. I flicked off the beam to my dash cam, no reason to let those images record again. I passed the junction where I'd first spotted the Tacoma, now overrun by grasses and marked by yellow evidence tape fluttering like ribbons in the breeze. Even from here, I could see the dull sheen of flashlights at work, officers combing the outskirts of the cabin's perimeter. My headlights swept over their backs as I turned onto County Road 113, then up the shimmying rise toward the station. I switched off the cruiser's lights to preserve my night vision. The station's windows glowed ahead like lanterns in a cave. I parked in my usual spot, slid out, and climbed the stairs to the entry lobby. The walls were lined with commendations and faded photographs of past sheriff's office milestones, centennial celebrations, recruit graduations, old black and white snaps of deputies on horseback. They felt like relics of simpler days before I knew how deep the darkness could run. Inside, I washed my hands under the harsh sink lighting, splashing cold water on my face. My reflection stared back, hollow-cheeked, eyes circled dark, jaw clenched. I let the water drip off my chin and patted my face with a towel until my hands stung. Then I straightened my uniform, reholstered my pistol, and walked down the corridor toward the briefing room. Captain Reynolds was still there, seated at the head of the long conference table, reviewing scribbled notes. He looked up as I entered, expression unreadable. Chloe stood at the far end, arms folded, exhaustion etched into her posture. They did not offer coffee or a seat. Tonight there was no comfort to be had. Reynolds nodded once. "Samuel, good. We're about to review Emily's statement." He tapped a remote, and the projector flickered to life, displaying a digital transcript of the bedside interview. Her voice wavering, recorded in the trauma unit as soon as she could speak. I leaned in, tracing the text with my finger. I heard whispers at first, like wind in the trees, but words calling my name. I thought it was Sam or Chloe at first, but it was something else. Then I saw them moving under the pit's edges, dark shapes, slithering, like smoke, but solid. When I scrawled help in the ash, the air snapped. I felt their breath, cold on my neck. They came out of the tunnel and lifted me. I don't know how far we went. The cabin was different. It looked like it had grown out of the ground, like roots and walls at once. I tried to scream, but my voice failed. And then you were there. They didn't wait. My throat clenched as I read. Chloe's voice broke the hush. She describes the pit as a tunnel network. That could explain the multiple hollows, more entrances than we saw. Reynolds tapped his pen, which means this isn't just a single victim scenario. Something built it, someone or something. He looked at me. Your call-out procedures were textbook. Perimeter check, K9, evidence collection, backfill. But none of that stopped whatever this is. It's not human. I swallowed hard. Whatever it is, it's adaptive. It knows our tactics. My voice was low, tired. Reynolds nodded grimly. We'll need to coordinate with the state police and maybe the National Guard's engineering unit. If these pits lead to a substructure, grid mapping them could be our only chance to seal them. Chloe rubbed her arms. What about public safety? If civilians go missing out there? Reynolds cut in. We've already issued a county-wide advisory. Cedar Ridge is closed indefinitely. Anyone caught trespassing faces charges. That should keep most people out. The slide changed, an aerial map of the ridge, overlaid with GPS markers from my dash cam and the K9's path. The pits formed a loose semicircle around the cabin, like spokes on a hidden wheel. Chloe zoomed in on one marker. This one is 28 yards from the cabin's north wall, exactly where Emily said they heard footsteps. Reynolds scribbled more notes. We need to locate and neutralize each opening. Start excavation at first light. Night had deepened into something primeval. We finished the briefing in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts, plans, fears, unresolved fragments of horror. I rose, shoulders stiff. I'm going home to rest. Wake me if you need me. Reynolds waved me on. Get some sleep, deputy. We'll reconvene at 0600. The walk back to my cruiser felt like wading through molasses. My uniform clung uncomfortably, damp with sweat and mud. I eased into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled out onto County Road 113. The road was deserted. Even the evidence tape at the junction had vanished. Headlights off, I followed the narrow ribbon of asphalt as it curled through silent woods. By the time I reached home, the station clock said 23:17. I parked, grabbed my duffel, and tossed it in the back seat, then ducked under the trees toward my front door, leaves crunching like dry bones. Inside, the house was dark and still. Photos of my daughter Emma on the mantel caught my eye, smiling, carefree, oblivious to the nightmares that haunt her father. I flicked on the hall light and headed to the kitchen, pouring a stiff whiskey on the rocks. I carried the glass into my study, sat at the desk, and flipped open my notebook. Page after page was filled with bullet points, witness statements, and scribbles. Pit at 1829, backpack at 1836, cabin entry 1918. To the side, I'd started a timeline of other missing person cases in Caldwell County going back decades. Everyone had vanished under similar circumstances. I ran a finger down the names. Marcus Lane, 1982, Julie Patterson, 1991, Tobias Crane, 1998. Each one had been found, or not found, along the same wooded stretch. I lifted my glass and stared at the amber whiskey, my reflection wavering in its surface. A voice inside me whispered, "They don't wait." I shook my head, grimacing. I stood and poured a second glass, then retreated to my front porch, settling into a worn rocking chair. The night was cool, the stars pale pinpricks above the tree line. I sipped my whiskey, listening to the creak of wood as I rocked. Somewhere beyond the treetops, owls called, and the world felt too big, too empty. My phone buzzed, an update from the hospital. Emily was stable, asking for her mother. A small comfort. But as I leaned back, I knew the danger wasn't gone. It had merely retreated into the darkness, biding its time. The last drops of whiskey slipped down my throat just before midnight, and I set the glass on the railing, watching the moon's reflection ripple in its melting ice. In the quiet, I heard something else, a soft scrape like fingernails on bark. I froze, chest tightening. The air stilled as though waiting. Nothing moved. I exhaled, but my breath caught in my throat when I realized it wasn't on the wind, it was beneath me, under the porch floorboards, a faint vibration like a heartbeat in the earth. I stood, heart hammering, and stepped forward until my boots touched the wooden planks. I ran a hand along the boards. Nails protruded slightly, warped wood at the edge. I crouched and shone a flashlight underneath. The beam illuminated dark emptiness, plumbing pipes, cobwebs, old insulation, and in the corner, a tiny hollow carved cleanly into the dirt foundation, just large enough to slip a hand through. I stood rigid, mind racing. It was impossible. My house was on a concrete slab. There should be no crawl space, no tunnels, nothing but solid rock and clay. But there it was, an opening leading down into the black, a hidden doorway carved into the earth itself. I pressed my palm to the dirt edge, feeling the damp pulse of something beneath. The earth shifted under my fingers, subtle but unmistakable. A memory flashed, Emily whispering, "Don't let them," as if pleading for someone to seal these doors forever. My blood ran cold as I realized it wasn't just Cedar Ridge. It was everywhere. Wherever the earth meets the wood, wherever shadows gather beyond our beams, the pits await. They don't wait, and neither can I. I rose, adrenaline flooding through me, knocking the chair over with a wooden clatter that echoed in the night. My flashlight beam wavered as I aimed it down the crawl space. The shaft led into complete darkness, fertile soil keeping secrets. I thought of my daughter, safe in her bed, oblivious to what lurked beneath. I took a deep breath, every instinct screaming at me to run. Yet my uniform felt stifling. My oath tightened like a noose. I knelt, slipping my pistol from its holster, testing its weight. It felt heavy, powerless against what lay beyond the plank floor. A soft scraping echoed from beneath, as if something moved toward me in the earth's womb. My heart thundered in my ears. I steadied the beam, staring into that hole carved by unseen hands, and realized tonight was far from over. The pits had come to my doorstep. I didn't flinch. I lifted my pistol, squeezed the trigger guard, and peered into the void. Whoever or whatever was down there, it would face law enforcement at its last breath. I eased my finger toward the trigger as the darkness responded with a whisper. They're coming back. I stand there, pistol trained on the yawning crawl space beneath my porch, every nerve ending thrumming with tension. The night is unnaturally still. Even the cicadas have fallen, silent, as if the world itself recoils from that hidden void. My flashlight beam trembles in my hand, illuminating tiny motes of dust drifting upward from the darkness below. I fight the urge to retreat, knowing that if I turn away now, whatever lies beneath will step out into the open, unchallenged. Swallowing hard, I ease forward until my belt buckle catches on the porch board's edge. The wood creaks faintly under my weight. I force myself to kneel, letting the beam penetrate deeper, but its reach is swallowed by the earth after only a few feet. The tunnel walls, if you could call them that, are hewn smooth, like they were carved by some massive, silent hand. The air that wafts up smells of damp clay and something faintly metallic, like old blood. I dip my pistol's laser dot onto the nearest earthen wall. Its red glow dances over the contours, tracing the circular shape of the opening. A soft scratching echoes back, subtle but unmistakable. Fingernails dragging across the dirt, moving toward me. My gut twists. I press against the board's edge, resisting the pull to stand, and dial my radio mic on my shoulder. Dispatch, Unit 2143, I'm investigating a possible underground entry at my residence. Stand by for coordinates. No answer. They're operating on another channel by now, tying up loose ends around Cedar Ridge. I curse under my breath. Another scrape, louder this time. I train my beam on the center of the hole. Something shifts in the darkness, an inky shape that resolves into a hand, pale, slender. Fingers splayed as it pushes against the earth's edge. The nails are long and filthy. It moves deliberately, as though feeling its way. My heart hammers. I lean closer, breath hitching. Who's there? My voice sounds small against the heavy stillness. The hand freezes, then retreats a few inches. I catch the faint glimmer of something wrapped around the wrist. A bracelet, maybe, with a single charm hanging from it. The radio crackles. Granger, come in. Command wants an update. Relief and panic collide. This is Granger, I pant. I've got intrusion at my home. I need assistance. Possible suspect in subterranean tunnel. The dispatcher's voice is calm but urgent. Copy that. Backup ETA, 3 minutes. Stay on scene, 3 minutes. That could be 20 in this setting. I glance over my shoulder at the dark edge of my yard, the trees beyond, the road like a ribbon of black glass. Should I retreat, seal the board over the hole, then wait with my back to the open? But I can't. My oath, my pride, something compels me to stand fast. The hand appears again, this time pushing dirt aside to widen the opening. The tunnel beyond yawns like a cave mouth. I sweep my beam inside. The walls curve downward into absolute black. I can't make out any floor, but a chill breeze wafts upward. brushing my face. I grip my pistol's grip tighter, knuckles white, finger brushing the trigger guard. A muffled voice drifts up, soft but urgent. "Don't leave, please." The tone is desperate, familiar. My blood runs cold. It's not Emily's voice, too faint, too distant, but it's human. A child's, a whisper from the darkness, pleading. "Hold on." I crouch lower, sliding my belt holster so the weapon's butt rests in my palm. The whisper comes again, more urgent. "They're closing in. Too late." Before I can respond, the light shifts behind me. Headlights slicing across my porch, then red and blue flashing beams. Backup has arrived. Sirens wail in the distance. I exhale, turning away from the hole. "They're here," I murmur into my headset. A team of 3 deputies and a detective rush onto the porch, one shining a powerful spotlight at the opening. The beam cuts through the gloom, illuminating a rounded tunnel edge carved precisely into the clay. Detective Ortiz kneels beside me, eyes wide. "Jesus, what is this?" he says softly. He leans in, shining his light down the shaft. "There's something down there." His voice trails off as the beam reveals a tangle of roots, and, farther down, what looks like discarded clothing. A pale sock floats in the air, currents like a clammy wraith. I crush the walk light button on my pistol's laser. The red dot dances across the tunnel wall. "Secure the perimeter," I order, voice steady despite the churn in my gut. No one approaches without me. I swap the pistol in my right hand, pulling the taser in my left. "Get me a grappling hook, rope, and chest-mounted light." While Ortiz radios for equipment, I stare into the abyss, hearing that faint, distant sob. "Please, help me." It could be my imagination, the wind carrying a reflection of Emily's voice back to me. But the pain in the sound is real. I imagine a child trapped down there, alone, terrified, begging for rescue. The wind gusts, rattling the porch boards. It sounds like sighs. I breathe shallow, raising my head to the night sky, where clouds race across a bloated moon. Lightning forks in the distance, distant thunder grumbling like a warning. The equipment arrives, a coil of nylon rope, a metal grappling hook, and a bright LED arc lamp. Ortiz hands them to me. I secure the hook to the rope's end, then test its weight. My hands tremble. I train the lamp down the hole and lower it slowly, watching the cord trail behind, unraveling in the dank air. The light swims against the tunnel walls. Patches of plaster-like fungus cling here and there, glinting wetly. I descend first, lowering myself on the rope, each foot finding purchase on the clay wall's irregularities. The dirt shifts under my weight. My boots kick up loose soil. My earpiece crackles with Ortiz's steady voice. "Stay with me, Sam." My heart pounds in my ears. At 10 feet down, the air grows colder. My breath mists out in front of me. I sweep the lamp in a slow arc. The shaft curves like a reversed cone, disappearing into deeper darkness. I catch another flash of something. A small shoe, half buried in mud. Then a metal canteen dented and streaked with rust. I continue descending, sliding until my knees graze the floor. I stand in a tight chamber, roughly 5 feet across. The lamp reveals narrow tunnels branching off in 4 directions: north, south, east, and west, each just wide enough for a person to crawl through. The floor is littered with old bones, animal jaw fragments, rat skulls, maybe deer ribs. My stomach churns. I sweep the beam south. There, pressed against the wall, sweat-streaked and filthy, is a child's backpack. Smaller than Emily's, olive green, unzipped and empty. Beneath it, etched into the clay, are letters, H-E-L-P, just like at the Suburban. The strokes are shaky, as if made by someone with cold, numb fingers. A whisper drifts through the tunnel from the west passage. You came. Too late. The voice is trembling, disembodied. I turn, shining the light east, but see only endless darkness. My earpiece crackles. Sam? You still with me? I clear my throat, voice low. I've found a chamber. Bones, tunnels in 4 directions. I need micro cameras. Ortiz's reply is immediate. On the way. Stay put. I holster the taser and grip the rope with one hand, lamp with the other, and step forward into the tunnel. The walls close in, claustrophobic, earthen pressure all around. The beam lights the path ahead. Wet clay slicks the floor, small rivulets running toward me. Footprints, bare footprints smeared in mud, lead west. I follow them, heart in my throat. As I round the bend, I catch a flicker of movement. A figure crouched at the far end of the corridor, back to me, head bowed. My voice falters as I call out, "Who's there? Show yourself." The figure shifts, raising a pale arm, pointing deeper into the darkness beyond. I shine the beam that way, but the tunnel curves sharply, blocking the view. The figure is gone. My pulse spikes. I take a cautious step, shifting the lamp. On the wall, scrawled hastily, are more letters. "Don't wait." The words drip with moisture as though freshly carved. My blood turns to ice. I realize that every message, every trap, every footprint is a breadcrumb leading hunters into this maze, to be swallowed by the earth. I inhale, steadiness forced into my voice. "Ortiz, text me those microcams and a second light, and tell Chloe I might need volunteers." Silence closes in. I tighten my grip on the lamp and press onward, deeper into the abyss, following that silent whisper into the heart of the subterranean darkness. I remember the weight of my flashlight pressing into my palm as I stepped off my cruiser onto the slick asphalt of Willow Creek Road. The steady hiss of rain against my jacket was the only sound besides the distant roar of the creek, swollen from last night's storm. My name is Sergeant Daniel Reed, badge number 4287, and I've logged more late-night missing person calls than I care to count, but this one felt different from the first moment I heard it. Dispatch came in at 0217 hours. A 911 hang-up from a cell phone registered to an address 2 miles east. The caller's number was untraceable. No subscriber info, no call history. Only a GPS ping that dropped us onto Willow Creek Road, where the pavement gives way to dirt and the forest crowding in on both sides. According to county records, a single blue Ford Explorer was registered there, owned by a Mrs. Ellen Harper. She'd reported her daughter, Sarah, missing 5 hours earlier. Her sister's only clue: the girl had left for a jog along the old trail that runs parallel to the creek and never returned. My partner, Officer Grace Mitchell, followed in her cruiser's low beams behind me. I held up a hand signal. "Stop!" She killed her engine. Her silhouette flickered in my high beams. We both stepped into the downpour, flashlight beams carving parallel cones of light into the darkness, illuminating rain droplets and drifting leaves. "No tire tracks," Grace murmured, kneeling beside a patch of fresh mud. I whirled my beam around the brush line. A pair of footprints, one left, one right, led away from the road, angled toward the creek's roar. I bent low to inspect. Women's jogging shoes, size 7, brand new looking, soles caked with mud. If it were Sarah's, then the trail was our only lead. I radioed in. Footprints heading eastbound into the woods. K9 unit requested. ETA 15. The crackle of static answered back. "Copy that, Reed. Unit en route." We followed the prints into the forest, branches scraping our jackets. The high beams caught glimpses of fallen logs and patches of bracken. The rain slowed to a drizzle as we pressed farther in. The forest canopy above swallowed most of the sky. My radio stayed silent except for the soft scrape of boots on mud. Every so often, I'd catch Grace's gaze, eyes wide, breath visible in the cold air. I felt that familiar knot in my chest, the warning that something wasn't right. 20 minutes in, the prints ended. No sign of continuation, just a slick creek bank and a shallow pool. I swept my beam across the water, half-submerged shoes, the same make we'd seen roadside, floating toe first. My stomach clenched. I radioed, read to dispatch, found shoes in water, possible evidence. Send medical examiner and water rescue team. The response came swift. Understood. Units dispatched. Grace crouched beside the bank. They're pointed downstream. She shone her light. I followed. 30 yards east, the water rushed through a narrow channel under tangled roots. I thought I heard a faint crack, like wood shifting. Grace flicked her light toward a collapsed hunting blind half hidden in undergrowth. The wooden ladder leading up had broken rungs. Beneath it lay a dark stain on the ground. My throat went dry. I snapped photos with my phone. Timestamp 3:04. Looks like a scuff mark, maybe blood, I said, voice low. Grace pressed a gloved finger to the ground. Definitely, and not old. I signaled her to cover me and moved forward to examine the stain. Every instinct screamed caution. Any cop who's been on the job knows you never approach potential crime scenes alone. But the sight of those shoes was enough. Kneeling, I nudged aside pine needles, deep red, fresh. I felt a twist of anger and fear for Sarah. Grace, get me a perimeter. Hold everything till rescue teams arrive. My heartbeat rang in my ears as I stood. The forest seemed alive with rustling shapes. And then I saw them. Handprints on the hunting blind wall, too high up to be hers. Someone's muddy palm prints, smeared in streaks. I bagged the prints with an evidence sheet and marked them. My mind reeled. Someone else had been here waiting. For what? For Sarah? Had she made it up the ladder and fallen? Or worse? A distant bark shattered the hush. Our canine team. I exhaled, relief clashing with dread. Dog approaching, Grace whispered into the radio. I watched the handler and his German shepherd emerge, light glinting off the dog's vest. The handler clipped on the leash. The dog lowered its head, sniffing. Grace shone her light on us. Let's see if she's thirsty, I muttered. The dog took off downstream, nose to the ground. My flashlight beam bounced as I followed. Every crack of a branch had me spinning around, expecting a dark figure. The farther we went, the narrower the channel. I thought I saw someone crouched by the water's edge, just a silhouette. I swung my light, but nothing. The dog paused, tense, then plunged into the creek, emerging moments later with something in its jaws. Grace's light bobbed over. The dog dropped it. It was Sarah's pink hoodie, damp, muddied. My stomach dropped. The hood was torn at the shoulder seam. No sign of her body, no footprints back, just that hoodie, clutched in mud, like a ragged flag. I signaled the handler to call it in. Then I felt it. A movement behind me, something shifting on the far bank. I turned, gun drawn, heart hammering. The forest was silent. I stepped forward, light trained on every brush. My glove snagged on a wire loop. I yanked free. That's when I registered the wire. Taut, strung across between two trees at knee height. Tripwire, I breathed. Grace, watch it. She froze mid-stride. I swept the beam, another wire, head height, loops hanging. Someone had set up a primitive snare line. My pulse spiked. This wasn't accidental. Sarah hadn't wandered into the creek by chance. She'd been lured, chased, trapped. I radioed immediate backup. Read to dispatch, critical. We have a snare line, possible abduction. Send SWAT and search helicopter. The reply came clipped. Copy that. Units responding. I felt the distant thrum of helicopter rotors. Lights flickered through the trees above. But in the forest below, where shadow and rain mingled, I felt completely alone. Tired, cold, heart pounding. The weight of the evidence pressed on me. Prints too high for her. Wires set with intent. Personal items planted. Someone knew police procedure. How we'd follow footprints. Call in the dog, mark the scene. And they'd used it against us. I paused at the creek bank, shining my light out over the water. The current swirled around the boots, the hoodie, carrying them downstream like wreckage. I thought of Sarah's mother, frantic, waiting by the phone. I thought of the parents' fear I'd felt answering similar calls. I thought of how many times we rush into darkness hoping for the best, and too often find a scene worse than we imagined. The forest sighed, the rain tapered, the helicopter overhead dipped, its spotlight rotating wide. I signaled up, "This is Reed, spotlight on the west bank." The beam settled on a clearing. In its center stood the Explorer. Headlights on, engine silent, doors open. No sign of driver or occupant. I caught my breath and turned to Grace, her face pale in the glow. "Stay here," I said. She nodded, radio in hand. I moved toward the SUV, every muscle coiled. The air smelled of wet leaves and diesel. I stepped inside, heart racing, scanning every inch. Papers scattered, the driver's seat reclined, a seatbelt buckled, but empty. Rust on the door frame caught the light, fresh scratches. Keys still in the ignition. I exhaled slowly, adrenaline spiking. There was no simple explanation. No stray jogger lost, no accidental fall. This was planned. And we were inside a trap box of someone's making, with only one way out. Deeper into the woods, following an abductor's path. I radioed Grace to move up. Together, we watched the forest edge as the helicopter's spotlight flickered. Somewhere out there, someone was watching us back, waiting for us to make our next move. And I knew that every protocol I had learned, every search pattern I had run, every missing person call I had answered, had prepared me for this moment. Yet nothing could prepare you for the knowledge that you're walking blind into a hunter's domain. I shut off the Explorer's engine, the headlights dying. My flashlight and my service weapon were all I had left. The forest closed in around me. The rain had stopped, but the shadows felt heavier than ever. I took a deep breath and stepped out into the dark, determined that this time we would find her. But deep inside, I couldn't shake the fear that we were already too late. The forest pressed in around us like a living thing, its darkness deeper than the night sky, as if the trees themselves conspired to swallow every scrap of light. My boots sank into the soft earth, and the hush was broken only by the distant hum of the helicopter's blades and the crunch of leaves underfoot. I stepped away from the abandoned Explorer, the hitch of stale diesel in the cab hanging in the air like an unspoken accusation. Grace moved beside me, muzzle of her flashlight cutting narrow arcs through the gloom. I glanced back at the SUV's open doors, the driver's seat cold, the engine's residual tremor gone. Whoever had driven this rig had vanished into the woods, leaving a breadcrumb trail of clues that reeked of manipulation. We advanced single file, Grace 5 paces behind. I kept my service weapon drawn but low, the barrel shaking slightly against the weight of my gloves. Every sense was on alert, the dull ache in my shoulders from the long night, the taste of damp leaves on my tongue, the faint metallic tang of fear settling in my gut. The snare lines had been set, too knee-high, too head-level, indicators of a mind thinking ahead anticipating pursuit. This was no random act of violence. This was a methodical abductor, one who knew law enforcement's tactics and used them to corral us. We followed a faint path, a barely perceptible track worn into the undergrowth, as if someone had walked this route many times before. The helicopter's spotlight waned as it circled away to search further east. We were on our own now. My radio whispered static, its battery weak in the cold. I flicked it off, silent in case our suspect had surveillance on our comms. After 10 minutes of cautious progress, the underbrush opened into a small clearing. An old hunting blind sat at its edge, the ladder rungs splintered and warped by time. The canopy overhead was thick, the pale moonlight unable to break through. In the center of the clearing lay a makeshift camp. A foldable chair, a small folding table, and a camp stove whose fuel canister had long since run dry. The ground around the fire pit was scorched black, ash mingled with pine needles. A discarded paper cup lay near the chair, the imprint still visible. Ranberry. I pocketed it as evidence, noting the brand and design. It was from a convenience store 10 miles back on the highway. Whoever had sat here had come prepared, bringing comforts from the outside world and leaving them behind as though to taunt the rescue teams. On the chair's armrest, I found a pair of gloves identical to mine. Same vendor, same cut, yet coated in dirt and damp. A violent twist of anger and déjà vu coiled in my chest. Another planted clue. Another invitation deeper into the woods. I touched the gloves gingerly, careful not to smudge prints. Grace snapped photos. "Dan," she whispered, voice tight. "This is staged. He's leading us." I nodded, mind racing. If I'd known anything from years on the force, it was that criminals rarely left breadcrumbs unless they wanted someone to follow. And this man wanted a chase. I scanned the clearing's perimeter. Dozens of small stakes hammered into the soil, rough-hewn branches marked with cloth strips at varying heights. Like a macabre totem field, they stood half-buried, arranged in loose circles. Each stake bore notches, carved almost imperceptibly, like tally marks. My throat tightened. A devilish timeline, counting down, counting up. I moved to inspect one stake more closely. Beneath the cloth, tied around its midpoint, was another wire loop, rusted but taut. If triggered, it would whip around a searcher's torso or trap a leg. I counted 7 stakes within eyesight, each with a tripwire loop. 7 lines to slow us, to maim us if we didn't care. 7 possible injuries before we could reach her. 7. How many hours had passed since Sarah disappeared? More than 7, but every second counted. Grace touched my arm. "Do we press forward?" I thumbed the safety off my sidearm. The metal clicked. "We do, but slow." We skirted the clearing's edge, leaving the stakes on our right. The path curved southward, deeper into a grove of hemlock and oak. The air grew cooler, the scent of damp earth stronger. Grace watched the ground, using her penlight to locate wires. I kicked aside brush, stepping carefully. The trails of moss and decaying leaves made the forest floor uneven, but I felt my footing. An experienced tracker knows the rhythm of the woods. A low groan rose from the undergrowth, like a branch bending under weight. I froze. My heartbeat thundered. Grace's flashlight jerked upward, nothing but shadows. I shifted forward. She followed. Another groan, closer, emanating from the dense thicket to our left. I raised my voice. "Police, identify yourself." My tone was firm but cautious, remembering protocols for making contact with potential suspects or victims. Silence, then a faint scuttling, as if something, or someone, crouched, pressed low to the forest floor. I signaled Grace to circle around, broadening our net. Her breath was a whisper in the dark. We moved in a half circle, flashlight sweeping. At the edge of the thicket we found her, a teenage girl, mud-smeared and ragged, face hidden under a tangled curtain of hair. But it wasn't Sarah. This girl's eyes were lifeless, her posture slack, as though she'd been left here to die. Her legs were tangled in wire, the tripwire having snapped around her ankles as she tried to flee. The duct-taped cloth at her wrists suggested she'd been bound. A homemade gag of cloth lay on the ground, damp and frayed. Grace rushed to her side, checking for heartbeat. "Madison," she murmured, peering at a laminated keychain I recognized, a membership card from the same gym Sarah attended. This was someone else. A woman reported missing 3 days ago in the neighboring county. The abductor had moved victims here. The stakes, the camp, they were all staged for us to find, orchestrated to delay and terrorize. My breath caught as I realized the timeline. Madison gone 3 days, recently discovered here. Sarah gone 5 hours, likely still somewhere ahead, trapped or worse. The abductor had held Madison through rain and cold, then moved her when rescue teams scoured her last known trail. He'd reused the camp and clearing, recycling the site, refining his snare field. This was his territory, and we were intruding on every step. Grace found a wrist ID bracelet on Madison's wrist, wet and stretched. S.A. Madison. Sarah's aunt had that same name. Family connection? Coincidence or calculated cruelty? The abductor knew Sarah's family. Every detail pointed to an insider, someone with knowledge of the victims' lives and the community's pulse. I knelt beside Madison, gently cutting the wire with my multi-tool. Her breathing was shallow, shock and exposure setting in. Grace radioed her status. Victim AF3 stabilized, requesting medical evac immediately. The voice crackled. Copy that. Medivac ETA 8. No time to comfort her now. I needed to push onward. I told Grace to stay with Madison and maintain a tight perimeter. Don't let her wander, I warned. The forest could swallow a person whole. My gaze darted down the path. Narrow, muddy, lined with more stakes disappearing into darkness. I moved forward alone, lessons from the academy and years on the job inspiring every step. I traced the wires with my gloved hand, lifting each loop over and stepping between. My radio and backup were far behind. The night was mine and the abductors. Every instinct screamed to turn back, to wait for SWAT, for the K-9 backup, for the armored rescue vehicle. But Sarah was still out there. I pressed on. The path began to ascend, the creek's roar receding behind me as the trees thinned. Moonlight broke through in a few shafts, illuminating a rocky ledge cloaked in moss. Below the ledge, the land dropped sharply. I shone my light down, a small clearing nestled against the slope, lit by the moon. At its center lay a battered camper trailer, its door ajar, interior dark. The tires were flat, one rim buried deep in mud as though it had been parked for weeks. I felt the familiar hitch in my chest, the cold prelude to dread. The trailer door's edges were smeared red, bright against the dull metal. Inside, I glimpsed a mattress stained and torn. A window cracked, its jagged edges catching the beam. No sign of Sarah, but the signs of violence were stark. I holstered my weapon and approached the trailer carefully. The door creaked as I pushed it open further. Inside, the musty scent of mildew mingled with copper and decay. My flashlight swept the floor. Discarded clothes, Sarah's running shorts, a torn t-shirt, her bright headlamp lying beside a pool of darker liquid. I pictured her last moments, trapped, bleeding, pleated into darkness. I twisted my radio back on. Read to dispatch. Possible victim location at North Ridge. Send medevac and full team. This is hot. My words fell into the void. No response. I hit the emergency channel. Static. Backup had to hear. I pivoted. The forest beyond the trailer was empty, but the trees whispered in the wind. I stepped out and scanned the tree line. A figure stood beyond the trailer's shadow. Tall, angular, face hidden. A shape so still it could be a stump. Yet in the moonlight I saw movement. A slow turn and a glint of metal. A rifle aimed in my direction. I ducked behind the trailer, heart pounding, adrenaline igniting every sense. Buffy the Predator had just revealed his position. My radio lay in my pocket, useless in that instant. I drew my weapon, breathing steady but loud in my ears. The figure took a step forward. The beam of his flashlight swung away, back into the forest. "Sarah," I whispered, half prayer, half command. I edged to the trailer's other side, flanking the intruder. Each step was measured, the ground slick underfoot. I counted to 3, heart thudding in sync with an invisible drummer. On 4, I fired a warning shot into the air. The crack echoed, startling. The figure froze. Moonlight glinted off the barrel of his rifle as he lowered it slightly. I called out, "Police, show yourself!" His voice was soft, almost amused. "You really think you can save her?" He sounded close, but I couldn't pinpoint him. My flashlight beam caught glints off leaves, his mirror, a reflection. He'd set up on high ground. I pivoted, scanning. Then, movement. Branches snap. I fired again, this time aiming low to disable. A yelp answered, followed by a crash. The intruder fell behind a thicket. I holstered my weapon and rushed forward, instincts blazing. I found him collapsed against a mossy rock, rifle fallen, one hand clutching his side. His mask had slipped, revealing a pale face framed by sweat-damp hair. Recognition struck like lightning. It was Deputy Harris, on detail at the station last week, known for his impeccable record and unflappable demeanor. My colleague, my friend. He gasped, pain and shock mixing in his eyes. I knelt beside him, gun still in hand. Why Harris? Why Sarah? His breath rattled, blood seeping. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he rasped. "I just wanted to test the system, prove a point, that no one sees the cracks until it's too late." My vision narrowed. I realized then it wasn't Harris's intent to kill. It was to demonstrate the vulnerabilities, to orchestrate this nightmare to show us how easily we could be led. His elaborate snare fields, the staged clearing, the planting of Madison's body, every detail had been a live exercise, a mock scenario that spiraled beyond control. His eyes met mine, haunted. We were all vulnerable, and I had to make them see. Sirens wailed in the distance. The K-9 team, SWAT, medics, they were rushing in. Harris slumped, exhaustion and guilt in every fiber. I closed his eyes gently, rising to my feet. The forest seemed to exhale around me. The trailer, the stakes, the snare wires, all fell silent witnesses. I radioed in the good news that the perpetrator was in custody and directed teams to secure Sarah's location. But as the floodlights of the armored vehicles glared into the trees and the shouts of officers filled the air, I could not shake the hollow weight in my chest. Harris's final words, whispered through broken breaths, echoed, "You never know who's watching until they decide to show you." And in that moment, the forest felt empty, not because the danger had passed, but because it had been watching all along, waiting for the right moment to remind us how fragile our sense of security truly is. The low light of dawn had not yet reached the forest floor, but the puncture wounds of flashbangs and spotlights clawed at the shadows. I crouched beside Deputy Harris's body, the mud of the trailer's doorstep still streaked across my uniform. The sirens and shouts of incoming units felt distant, as though muffled by the trees themselves. I allowed myself a beat to swallow the bile of betrayal. Harris, the man I trusted with my life, had orchestrated this entire horror. Behind me, Officer Mitchell stabilized Sarah on a stretcher, her thigh wound cleaned and bandaged, her eyes closed but breathing steady. EMTs hefted the gurney toward the armored vehicle lights, the forest parting for them like a stage. Grace caught my eye and gave a single, solemn nod. No words could capture the blend of relief and dread pounding through me. I rose, brushing rain-damp leaves from my jacket. The clearing around the trailer was now a hive of activity. SWAT officers combing the perimeter, K-9 teams corralling tripwires, technicians photographing every stake and rusted wire loop. One tech held up a stake, its notches clear as tally marks. He frowned. At least 23 of these set out in a 200-foot radius. 23, I echoed, jaw tight. He wanted us to bleed. A beam of sunlight filtered through the pines as the first true light of morning cut through the haze. I followed its path to the horizon, where the sky glowed steel blue. The forest exhaled, rustling leaves, distant calls of waking birds. Nature reclaiming what man had twisted into a hunting ground. I walked the line of stakes, counting scars on the wood. Each tally a victim, or a near miss. The camp, the hooked badge Harris wore when he confronted me, the planted hoodie, the staged body of Madison. Every dark element had served as a lesson in vulnerability. But the question tearing at my gut, for whom was this lesson? The department? The community? Or me, personally? My radio crackled. Sergeant Reed, command wants a debrief at headquarters ASAP. You up for transport? It was Chief Martinez's voice, clipped with urgency. I took a steadying breath. Affirmative. I'll be there in 10 minutes. I clipped the radio to my vest and holstered my weapon. As I moved toward the path to the road, my boots sloshed through pooled water, the ground churned by dozens of footsteps. Gray dawn light revealed the stretched wires lying like serpent skins across the forest floor. I paused at the broken ladder of the hunting blind, remembering the boots floating in the creek, the handprints too high for Sarah, the radio time discrepancy. Every clue had been a thread in Harris's tapestry of fear. A patrol car idled at the forest edge, lights strobing gently. I slid into the passenger seat, Grace in the driver's seat, and we drove the winding forest road back to civilization. The cabin lights of Maplewood came into view, neon signs, sleepy storefronts, the thin trail of a highway disappearing into morning traffic. It looked untouched by the nightmare we'd just escaped. At headquarters, Chief Martinez met me in the lobby. Grim, eyes red, he clasped my shoulder. Good work, Reed. You and Mitchell saved that girl's life. I nodded, the weight of the night lodged in my chest. Harris. He planned every step. My voice cracked. Everything. The chief led me to a small conference room. Papers and maps littered the table. Drawings of stake patterns, photos of tripwires, timelines marked in red. Detective Alvarez joined us, her face pale. We recovered Harris's notebook. He had entries for 6 other missing person cases across 3 counties, cases we never connected. She tapped the notebook, opened to a page scrawled in cramped handwriting. Victim 1, E. Phillips, June 2nd, 1987. Lesson in complacency. Victim 2, J. Morales, July 14th, 1987. Faith and protocol. Victim 3, Emser Carter, August 23rd, 87. Trust in uniform. Victim 4, A. Doyle, September 5th, 87. Reliance on dogs. Victim 5, L. Davidson, October 12th, 87. Chain of command. Victim 6, A. Madison, October 28th, 87. Public panic victim. 7. S. Harper, October 29th, 87, ultimate test. Grace's hand brushed my arm. My gaze locked on the entry for S. Harper, Sarah's name, written last. A final test. The notebook fell open further, revealing a crude map of Willow Creek Road, the camp, the trailer, and a small X deep in the forest. Marked Endgame. I swallowed hard. The X had to mark where Harris intended to stage the final act, where Sarah's fate would be determined. It was here, in front of me, on this table. His lessons, his choreography, his twisted dedication to proving the system's flaws, all laid bare. Chief Martinez's voice broke through my haze. "We need you on the forensic team," he said quietly. "We have to revisit every case, figure out who else survived, who didn't, and ensure this never happens again." I leaned forward, fingertips resting on the map. "Start with that X," I said. "We go in together, full team, no lone wolves. If there's any hope of finding survivors or remains..." "Зрение, мы находим это." Detective Alvarez nodded. "I'll coordinate with SWAT and the coroner." I exhaled slowly, thinking of the forest, the stakes, the trailer's bloodstains, a city cop in a small-town patrol, a trusted deputy, a hunter in the shape of a brother in blue, and the broken vows we took to protect the innocent. The room felt colder. Papers fluttered as the overhead fan spun. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of every lesson Harris had forced upon us. Fail-safe protocols, redundancies, backups, every step of the process he had exploited. But his notebook held our roadmap out of the darkness. If we moved fast, if we worked as smart, we could turn his endgame into our redemption. I looked up at the ceiling lights, their glare harsh after the forest's muted glow. "Let's move," I said. "There's no time to lose." In that moment, I felt the steel of my resolve harden. The hunt was far from over, but this time we controlled the terms. And as I stood, the fluorescent lights flickered once, twice, like a heartbeat, before settling into an unblinking glare. The air thrummed with tension, as though the building itself held its breath. The final test loomed, and with every second we edged closer to the X, to the truth, and to a reckoning that would echo through the hallways of this department, and the hollow heart of Willow Creek itself. Sunlight filtered weakly through the clouds as we loaded gear into the unmarked vans, breaching tools, comm radios, forensic kits. My uniform was still damp from last night's rain, but today's chill felt different, sharper, laden with anticipation. The forest behind headquarters stretched beyond the lot, its perimeter plotted on the map before me. That crude X drawn by Harris, our endgame, lay deep in that shadow. Grace checked our comm channels, voices coming through low static. SWAT had deployed 2 teams, one to secure the corridor of stakes, the other to approach from the north ridge. I reviewed the map again, tracing the path through the camp clearing, past the trailer's site, and into a narrow valley he'd marked. Radio crackled as Alvarez confirmed drone support, infrared eyes overhead to catch heat signatures among the trees. I gathered my team, 2 detectives, a medic, 2 patrol officers. "Stay close," I said, voice tight. "No tripwires. Watch every footfall. If you see wire or stake, call it out. No heroics. We go in slow, methodical. We find Sarah, then we get out." We moved in convoy down Willow Creek Road, tires crunching over gravel. At the forest edge, the lead van stopped. We donned helmets, gloves, and night vision goggles. Sunrise offered little light under the canopy. Our footsteps fell silent as we crossed the threshold, each officer's breathing visible in the cool air. I felt the forest's hush brace us, the wind stilling, as if the trees themselves waited. The first stakes appeared within a dozen yards, remnants half buried, cloth strips flapping like wounded flags. I pointed. Left flank, officer. He knelt, clipped the loop, and stowed it. Another step, another stake. Right side, detective. Wire at ankle height. She cut and collected. We marched between the remains of Harris's snare field, each loop and notched post a relic of last night's terror. The clearing of the camp came quickly. Empty chairs, torn cups, soggy gloves, evidence preserved in dawn's pale light. Drone buzzed above, spotlighting the ground to reveal footprints we had missed. I tapped my earpiece. Infrared shows no life forms here. Move through. We crossed, following the faint drone beam toward the north ridge. The camper trailer loomed ahead, its door sealed shut by SWAT. I acknowledged the team and pressed deeper, entering the valley's mouth. The trees arched overhead, knotted roots forming a tunnel of living wood. Underfoot, mud sucked at boots. My heart pounded a steady rhythm of dread and determination. I thought of Sarah's face, her last known scream swallowed in these woods, and it drove me onward. We came upon the X site, a small clearing ringed by 12 stakes, arranged precisely around a shallow pit. The drone's spotlight danced on the pit's edge, a jagged metal grate embedded in the earth. I knelt, peering down. The grate covered a narrow shaft, its metal bars slick with condensation. A faint echo reverberated upward, distant but unmistakable. A soft whimper. My blood ran cold. I tapped my radio. Read to Alpha Team. Acoustic loop confirms a voice underground, likely Sarah. Prepare entry. The medic signaled readiness with stretchers and ropes. SWAT deployed a cover perimeter as I approached the pit with a flashlight and comm cord. The whimper became clearer. Muffled sobs repeated, "Help, please." I secured a rope to my belt, clipped to a harness the medic checked twice. "I'm going down," I said, voice steady but raw. Grace's hand on my shoulder. "Be safe." I nodded, sliding through the grate, limbs burning with the descent. The air grew cooler, musty. Light from above shrank into a distant circle. I landed on damp soil in a narrow tunnel, walls slick with mold. My flashlight revealed graffiti, Harris's handwriting. Lesson 7, Rescue. The tunnel sloped down, water dripping in steady taps. The whimper led me forward, every footstep an echo. My radio crackled faintly. Read, descending. Keep comm open. Ahead, a dim glow. Sarah's headlamp, battery dying. I ran, careful not to slip. She was huddled against the wall, tears streaked through mud, eyes wide with relief and terror. "Detective Reed." Her voice trembled, strength fading. I dropped beside her, unstrapping my harness. "I've got you," I whispered, sweeping her into my arms. She clung to me, sobbing. I pressed my jacket around her. "You're safe now. We got you." Behind me, I secured the comm cord and rope for hoisting. SWAT's voices echoed as they prepared the pull. I choked on emotion, relief, rage, sorrow. As they winched us upward, I looked back into the tunnel's darkness. The grate above closed, sealing away the horrors Harris had engineered. Sarah emerged first, supported by medics, her face pale but alive. Then me, dust-covered, soaked, heart pounding. I saw the stakes behind me, the shattered trailer, the creek where boots had floated. Every mark, every planted clue, every twisted game, unraveled by tenacity and teamwork. Yet a knot of unease remained. Harris's map showed no remains, just survivors. What of the other victims? How many lessons remained uncovered? Above ground, I handed Sarah to EMTs. She clutched my hand, whispering, "Thank you." I nodded, voice catching. As they led her away, I met Grace's gaze. No words, just grim resolve. I turned back to the forest, where morning light began to push shadows aside. The forest floor, once a hunting ground, now lay quiet. The scar of the pit, Harris's final stage, was about to be excavated, studied, and sealed. But the lessons endured: vigilance, compassion, the relentless pursuit of truth. I keyed my radio, all units, site secured. Recover evidence, call in coroner for the shaft, we're heading back. The forest responded with a breeze, its leaves shaking free of rain. As we exfiltrated the site, I carried Sarah's helmet, the last piece of her ordeal. In my pocket, I kept a stake fragment, notched 7 times. A reminder of the hours we survived, the ones we couldn't. And as the road to Maplewood unfurled before us, I felt the weight of every missing person, every test, and every vow etched into that forest's silence. When we reached the edge of the trees, the sky was clear, no more rain. I looked back one final time, the forest dark against the dawn. A place of nightmares, now a site of rescue. But I knew its darkness lingered, waiting for the next lesson. And I would be ready. The convoy rolled back onto Willow Creek Road under the rising sun, dust kicking up behind the unmarked vans as we followed Grace's cruiser in single file. The forest behind us receded into a shadowed line against the pale sky, its canopy still whispering with hidden dangers. I sat beside Sarah in the front seat, her shoulders trembling as EMTs wrapped her in a thermal blanket. Her eyes, glassy from trauma and exhaustion, tracked every flicker of movement outside. I offered her a tight smile, my own face taut with relief, and something darker, something unquiet. The radio buzzed with chatter, evidence teams coordinating collection, the coroner querying about remains, SWAT confirming all tripwires and stakes were recovered. Every word reminded me of the night's ferocity. The stakes rigged to shred flesh, the tripwires looping ankles, the staged killings, the living lessons Harris had written in blood. My gloved hands rested on the dashboard. The thrum of the engine matched the slow drumbeat in my chest. Despite Sarah's rescue and Harris's capture, the forest's nightmarish blueprint had not been fully unraveled. Other victims, 6 more, still needed answers. Their families would demand them. And Harris's map, marked with lessons and dead ends, pointed to other shadows we had yet to illuminate. At headquarters, I led Sarah and Grace into the debrief room. The walls were lined with case boards, photos of Harris's victims, sketches of snare lines, timelines woven in red and black markers. Detective Alvarez and Chief Martinez awaited us, fatigue etched into their faces. Sarah sat at the table, legs shaking. Grace hovered by the door, glancing at the boards with a veterinarian's precision. Every animal caught in trap instinct firing. I stood silent, letting the room fill with relief and urgency. Chief Martinez cleared his throat. "Sarah, you're safe now," he said gently. "Your family is on the way." Sarah nodded, tears spilling free. Grace pressed tissues into her hand. I drew a breath, then addressed the room. We have confirmation that Harris used his map to cycle through the 6 other sites. We recovered enough DNA fragments and personal effects to identify 4 out of 6, and no remains so far. The coroner will coordinate search warrants on those locations next. Alvarez tapped a printed sheet. The sites include a logging trail north of Riverton, an abandoned quarry east of Pineville, the old railway trestle by the river, and a disused mill outside Grants Creek. 2 others we haven't pinpointed exactly. His marks were vague, but we'll cross-reference his notebook with missing person reports. The team exchanged determined nods. The room buzzed with activity. Laptops opening, phones dialing, deputies sprinting out to mobilize units. I excused myself and stepped into the corridor, the weight of the night pressing down. My partner's jacket hung on a rack, the blue fabric stained with mud and blood. I brushed my fingers over the badge, read 4287, seeing behind it every fear I had chased into the woods. My radio crackled. Sergeant Reed to all units. Coordinate with forensics on the remaining X sites. Update me immediately on any findings. I clicked off the mic, heart still racing. In that instant, I felt a cold draft at my back, as though the forest itself had slipped into headquarters. I turned, nothing but a row of lockers and the echo of distant footsteps. I walked down the hall to my office. The door creaked open to reveal the floor littered with case files, a mosaic of tragedy. On my desk, beneath a single lamp, lay Sarah's headlamp, cleaned and unbroken. Next to it, I placed a stake fragment, the wood notched precisely 7 times. I stared at the notches, counting them one by one, a silent witness to Harris's twisted syllabus. But the 7th notch felt different, deeper, as though carved in haste under moonlight. A reminder that his final lesson, rescue, would not end with 6 survivors and 1 victim. It would echo in every corridor and forest we had yet to search. I sank into my chair, eyes closing. The room hummed with the soft glow of monitors and the low thrum of HVAC. I swiveled, studying the corner where the lamp's light faded into dimness. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw movement, a shape slipping behind the filing cabinet. My breath caught. I snapped my head back to the desk. Nothing. Only the stake fragment and the headlamp, innocuous in their stillness. I exhaled and reached for a mug of coffee. Black, no sugar, the way I drank it on long nights. My hand closed around the chipped ceramic as a chill traced down my spine. The lamp's glow flickered once, twice. I set the mug down, every nerve taut. The lamp stabilized. I told myself it was nothing, an electrical surge, fatigue playing tricks. At midnight, I would return here to finish the paper trail, witness statements, lab reports, GPS coordinates of snare sites. I would read every line of Harris's notebook, decipher every scrawl of his manifesto. I would track down the last 2 locations. I would find the final lesson he left unlearned. But for now, I shut off the lamp. The office fell into darkness save for the glow of distant monitors. I stood, pocketed the stake fragment, and flicked the overhead light switch. The fluorescent bulbs clicked off, plunging the room into silence. As I stepped into the corridor, the door swung shut behind me, with a soft thud that sounded too deliberate to be the hinge. In the empty hallway, under the fluorescent buzz of emergency exit signs, I paused. My footsteps echoed. I glanced to the side. The window overlooking Willow Creek Road was dark, except for the faint reflection of my badge in the glass. 4287, shining dull gold. I placed a hand over the reflection, feeling its cold metal against my palm. And in that moment, as the clock above the door ticked toward midnight, I felt a presence behind me. The soft scrape of wood, the whisper of fabric, as though a tripwire had been strung across the corridor. I spun around. Nothing. Just an empty hallway stretching into darkness. My breath came fast. I tapped my radio. Read to base. Anyone still here? Over. Static. No response. I clicked the radio off, the silence pressing in. Under the flickering exit sign, I caught one last glimpse of the corridor's end, where the shadows pooled like ink. And I knew that Harris's lessons had not ended in the forest. They lived here, in every dark place we thought secure, waiting to remind us that no system is infallible, no path fully cleared. I stepped forward, the echoes fading behind me. But as I reached the door to the lobby, the exit sign blinked once more, and I swear I heard the quiet rasp of notches being carved into wood, counting up toward an 8th tally. marking a lesson we were only just beginning to learn. The sun had fully broken over Maplewood by the time we wrapped up the last evidence bag. Rustling trees lined Willow Creek Road as I stepped out of the command van, blood still pounding in my ears. Sarah's parents were waiting by the station's front steps, faces drawn, eyes red, clutching each other as EMTs escorted Sarah inside for evaluation. I watched them. I stood scanning the tree line. Rain began to patter. I knew then our job wasn't just rescue, it was hunt. Because whoever was out here, whoever had old film and red tape, wasn't a hunter. He was preying on fear itself. And we'd just stumbled into his dark gallery. I raised my voice. "Ramirez, get Carter up. We're moving him to Ridge Road. I'm coming behind you." My words were calm, but adrenaline burned my veins. As we helped Brian to his feet, engine roar cut through the night, flashing lights of a medical unit up on the ridge, and in that moment, as the beams converged on our little group, I could have sworn I saw a figure standing just beyond the tree line. A silhouette tall and still, camera slung low, watching us leave. I swore I saw him frame a shot before slipping back into the black. I'll never forget that look in Carter's eyes as we carried him away. The mix of terror and knowing that something out there, something human and something else, had turned his life into a nightmare gallery. I drove back alone, siren off, spotlight cutting swaths in the mist. My cruiser's rearview mirror held only me and the road. But I kept half expecting to see shadows flitting behind me, waiting for their turn to be captured. By the time I hit the highway and the woods opened to lights of civilization, I knew I was no longer chasing a missing hiker. I was chasing a ghost with a camera. And I wasn't sure who would end up the latest frame. I still carry that image with me. The red tape on the carabiner, the barefoot print, the film camera clicking in the dark. And every night when the radio goes silent, I wonder if he's out there, waiting for me to come back. Because darkness isn't empty. It's full of eyes, full of lenses, waiting to freeze your worst moment for all eternity. And some of those shadows are alive. They're patient. They're dangerous. And they hunt in silence. I don't know when he'll come for me, but I know it's only a matter of time. I eased the throttle on the Interceptor's V6 as county lights blurred past the windshield, the rain-drenched road gleaming like spilled mercury beneath the headlights. My heart hadn't slowed since we dropped Carter off. Hypothermia risk and fractured ribs shunted aside by the terror in his eyes. Dispatch confirmed medevac inbound, and with Carter safe, if only barely, I felt a hollow ache of relief hollowed further by the weight of unanswered questions. I tried to think like an officer processing evidence. Footprints, carabiner, a film camera, and Carter's ravings about shadows. But logic tumbled away under exhaustion. My mind circled back to that silhouette, standing just beyond the tree line, camera slung low. The image haunted me more than the blank expanse of dense firs and cedars. He'd been watching us leave, framing us in his viewfinder like exhibits behind glass. By the time I hit the junction onto Highway 22, the drone's whine had faded, replaced by the echo of my own heavy breathing. I flicked on the radio. Unit 12-Alpha to dispatch. I'm en route to station. Need evidence tech to retrieve that carabiner and bag the footprints. And send extra units to sweep Thompson Ridge. Ground and air, something's off. Static crackled, then, copy that, 12-Alpha. Will coordinate with K9 and air unit. The dispatcher's calm tone felt surreal against my thudding pulse. I turned on the siren briefly, more to clear my own head than traffic. We passed the spot where Carter's footprints ended. Then the sign for Pine Ridge County line dipped below the windshield. Streetlights reappeared. Evidence of civilization trickled in. Mailboxes, fences, a lone stray cat darting under a porch. I wanted to believe the nightmare stayed behind me in the forest, but adrenaline refused to let me forget. Back at the station, lights burned in the evidence bay. Detective Larson met me at the door, face drawn. He'd reviewed the initial reports and seen the bagged items. "I've never seen red tape on a carabiner used as evidence before," he muttered, tugging at his collar. "And barefoot prints in a muddy campsite. Boots everywhere else. Your report says boot, then barefoot, then boot?" I nodded, unzipping my wet jacket. "Exactly. And that campsite arrangement, fire ring still greasy but no embers. Then those prints circling it like someone was pacing." I rubbed my temples. "And Carter swore he saw someone taking pictures. Said film cameras were his preference, old school. He knows nothing about photography." Larson frowned. "We got 6 missing person calls in the Forest District this month. Hikers, hunters, even a jogger. All found disoriented, but none had clear recollections. Just fragments, like nightmares edged at the corners of their minds. None reported cameras, though." He stared at the carabiner in its bag. "What if these aren't isolated cases?" A knot formed in my gut. "You mean a serial predator? But why film? Why not digital?" "Film means developing, waiting days to see the results." I glanced back at the footprints. Unless he's hunting experiences, not bodies, capturing fear on film like trophies. Larson's lips twitched into a grim expression. "Then we're dealing with someone organized, patient, someone who wants to savor fear." He retrieved a pair of latex gloves and slipped them on. "Let's get these prints lifted properly. Then we need to get agents from the Bureau's Forensics Division here and notify neighboring counties. Someone with a film camera might have purchased specialized gear recently." I exhaled, guilt twisting my chest. I should have stayed in pursuit. I left Carter alone. Maybe he could have pointed the way. I pushed my damp hair back. "I'm going back out at first light, ground team sweep, thermal follow-up. I'm not letting him slip away." Larson nodded. "Get some rest, Miller. The early shift is rough, but we need you sharp." I managed a curt nod and trudged to the locker room, peeling off my uniform. The hum of the station's fluorescent lights and distant chatter of night shift officers felt hollow. I showered quickly, my hands still shaking, and pressed my head against the cold tile wall for a moment. Sleep was impossible. My mind replayed the scene. Carter slumped against the tree, blood and mud on his sleeves, eyes wide in primal terror. I returned to my desk and opened the case file, cluttered with maps, photographs of the campsite, Carter's statement and Larson's notes. I spread them out like a virus under a microscope. Photos of wet footprints, the red-taped carabiner, Carter's blood-streaked raincoat, his cracked phone. I noted the anomaly. Footprints unnaturally small for Carter, alternating barefoot and boot prints, like someone chose when to be vulnerable. Why? My phone buzzed. A text from my partner, Ramirez. "You good?" I typed back. "Working on it. Heading home soon. Sleep?" "Can't. I'm on edge. Let's hit breakfast at station at 0600. I stared at the screen. Edge. Good. I needed that. Sleep would dull my senses. Breakfast at 0600. Fine. I locked up evidence, dark-bagged the carabiner, stashed Carter's items in the evidence locker. The station was quiet now. The rotating lights on squad cars in the bay offered the only movement. I sat at my desk until 3:30 a.m., scribbling on a notepad. Check local camera supply stores for film sales, interview last 6 missing persons for camera sightings. Advise Carter's family on recovery protocols. Confirm. K9 sweep results. By the time I left, dawn was coloring the sky silver and purple. Heavy clouds loomed southward, storm rolling in. I braced for the cold wind as I climbed into my personal SUV, unmarked, loaded with binoculars, a DSLR with a telephoto lens, my own equipment. I'd taken up photography years ago before the job chewed up my life. I wanted to capture something myself before dawn, something he couldn't manipulate. County Road 47 was quiet at dawn. No vehicles, no hikers. I parked at the turnout, attached my body cam, and clipped my sidearm in place. Ramirez joined me in his SUV. "You think he's back?" he asked, voice low. I didn't answer. We'd both seen enough. We entered the woods on foot, side by side. I led, pulling my mag light from the holster. The storm hadn't hit yet, but a low rumble echoed through the pines. Footprints from last night's drone lights were still visible. Shallow impressions in the soft soil. I paused, kneeling, and pressed the DSLR shutter gently, capturing the scene. The camera displayed a single frame, footprints fading into the darkness. I scrolled back and forth. Nothing else, but I sensed movement, tiny rustles all around. Ramirez tapped me. "Here, heat signature, a little to the east." He pointed uphill. I raised my camera, clicked, and through the viewfinder I saw a dark shape crouched beyond the clearing, silhouette hunched by a tree. I lowered the camera in a flash. Ramirez raised his rifle. "Identify yourself," he bellowed. No response. The shape jerked, as if startled, then darted into the trees. We chased after the figure, sprinting over roots and rocks. My lungs burned. Leaves slapped at my face. Mist hung in the air, slick on my neck. I reached the edge of a ravine and glimpsed a flash of white, cotton fabric. I scanned with binoculars. No one there. My heart thundered. I sighted back toward the woods, muddy footprints, but no figure. Ramirez cursed under his breath. "Split up?" he asked. I shook my head, tapping the radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12-Alpha. Visual on possible suspect at grid point 3. No confirm. Advise caution." The dispatcher crackled acknowledgement. I dropped to a knee and examined the ground. In the mud was imprinted the outline of a camera lens cap, circular, about 2 inches across, pressed as if someone had planted it on the ground. Next to it, a single drop of blood, bright against the damp earth. I bagged the cap, heart hammering. Ramirez shone his light around. He left blood. He pressed his ear, disappear through the doors, shoulders slumped with exhaustion and relief. Behind me, Grace handed off the last piece of the snare wiring, a frayed loop taken from the northern quarry site. "That's the final site confirmed," she said quietly. "All victim locations logged, 2 still with no remains." Her voice trembled, betraying the fatigue we both felt. I nodded, swallowing hard. "We'll bring closure," I promised, and believed it for the sake of every family still waiting. The station's interior felt cold and sterile compared to the forest's gloom. The debrief room was empty. Maps and boards had been cleared. Only the lingering echo of hurried footsteps and the faint smell of forensic solvent remained. I dropped the wire into a bin labeled Exhibit W-7, the 7th lesson, Harris's final test, our own redemption. I wandered toward my office, every corridor familiar yet haunted by last night's shadows. At my desk lay a single file, the Harris dossier. Photographs of stake fields, tripwire diagrams, witness statements, and the notorious notebook pages plastered across its cover. I opened it to the final marked entry. Victim 7, S. Harper. Ultimate test. The words blurred as tears stung my eyes. Not because of Sarah, that she was alive was a miracle, but because of Harris's cold precision. His lessons had forced us to confront every blind spot in our procedures, our trust, even our own convictions. And although he was locked away in a cell, his influence lingered like mist among the pines. My radio crackled. "Reed, this is Chief Martinez. We've got a call from the district attorney. He wants a full briefing. He's impressed with the night's outcome, but he demands answers on those 2 unlocated victims. ETA 10 minutes. I clicked off, my jaw tight. I rose and walked to the window overlooking the lot. The forest beyond seemed serene in daylight, its dark heart invisible beneath emerald leaves. But I knew the truth. Beneath that green canopy lay 6 other X's, 6 other traps, and possibly 6 other souls. Our rescue had rewritten Lesson 7, but Lessons 1 through 6 still cried out for justice. Footsteps approached. Grace appeared, coat over her uniform, hair damp. She offered me 2 coffees, black as always. I took one, nodding in gratitude. "We did good," she said softly. "Better than good. We saved her." I stared at the coffee, steam curling upward like ghostly tendrils. "We saved Sarah. But what about the others?" My voice was low, haunted. "We owe them more than a report. We owe them the same determination." She placed her hand on my shoulder. "And we'll give it." I set the coffee down and opened the dossier to a blank page at the back. This was where I'd write the next chapter. Coordinates, witness interviews, search plans. I pulled out a pen and wrote, Lesson 8, Never Stop Hunting. Outside, the late morning sun warmed the pavement. Officers bustled between cruisers, children waved from passing cars, and life in Maplewood edged back toward normal. But normal had changed. The badge on my chest felt heavier, carrying the memory of darkness and the promise of vigilance. I closed the notebook and stood, heart steadying. Grace and I walked side by side to the incident room, ready to brief the DA, ready to mobilize teams again. Because the last lesson was clear: evil doesn't stay buried, and justice demands we follow every X, cross every line, and hunt until every voice in the dark is heard.